Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei became lore's strongest Dragonlord. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. A floating creature with ice-colored skin and bits of armor smiled as it took in the surroundings. The spirit, Aegis, noted that the place was very different from Ravenloss. Issei Hyoudou, a young man in his mid-teens, returned the smile. His trench coat with a white fur-lined collar and tattered tails stirred in the breeze. He stood with the dragon head sigil embroidered proudly on the back of his coat, gauntlets patterned like green scales on his arms, and a pair of crimson orbs set into the gear near his wrists. Aegis grinned and said it was not a bad change. Issei admitted that being back after a decade and inhabiting a teenage body felt odd. Aegis agreed that it had felt the same when the spirit had used that body. Issei had imagined a different future for himself, and the disappointment showed as bitter tears tracked down his face. Aegis teased him about his sulking and reminded him that they were back in his home. Issei complained that the return was worse than being sealed in ice, lamenting that the life he had pictured was now out of reach. Aegis sighed and warned that Lady Alicia would be annoyed with him. Issei replied that she could not accompany him here because of her duties as the newest high priestess of the dragons and that, in another timeline, she would have been with him. A warm memory surfaced of a beautiful pink-haired woman in gold-embroidered white robes teaching him and others alongside dragons. Aegis then gently reminded Issei that it was time to go back home. Issei snapped his fingers, and his form disappeared. Several minutes later, a crimson-haired woman accompanied by several others materialized on the rooftop of a building. The leader, referred to as the president, immediately detected that magic had been used in their territory. She observed that the magic felt different from what they usually encountered, more potent. The bespectacled woman with a bob cut examined the residual trails and noted that the signature of the magic resembled that seen during a past skirmish between Diodora Astroth's forces and elements of the church in Europe, though the energy here in Kuo seemed more varied. A petite woman with white hair narrowed her eyes and told the group she sensed death along with fire and ice. The red-haired president suggested the unknown user of magic might be the same person who had been dealing with stray supernatural threats in the area. The bespectacled analyst cautioned that the probability of a single individual being responsible was low, but the presence of similar magical traces could connect recent incidents. They compared notes about the last stray devil they had encountered, which bore signs of holy magic and had suffered injuries. Their coordination with members of the Grigori had ruled out the Grigori's direct involvement. From that, the group inferred that more than one independent magic user was operating in Kuo, possibly including a necromancer and a holy practitioner, and worried that the town could become a battlefield if those forces met. The president concluded that it would fall to their group to prevent such a clash, while another member suggested that a holy practitioner might be persuadable to aid the townspeople, since such individuals were expected to be virtuous. Back in his room, Issei sneezed as he sharpened a spear across his lap. On the table beside him, a curled bundle of green scales with intelligent crimson eyes watched him and let out a low growl. Issei reassured the creature that he was fine and explained that someone had just been talking about him. A hidden garden caught the morning breeze. A young woman in the robes of a sister of the church sneezed, white hair dancing as her blue eyes found a pair of pupilless white eyes that looked up to meet them. The small dragon, its white eyes fixed on her, thought that the pervert must be talking about it again. She noted aloud that he should be back on Earth now as well, in Kuo, Japan, a territory overseen by the sisters aligned with Leviathan and Satan. A soft growl and a chirp came from the bundle of golden white scales before her. She whispered that he was the Dragonlord of Doom and the fabled hero of destiny, and memories of a brown-haired young man grinning at her emerged, memories of the two of them hiding in bushes, playfully arranging matches for people they treated like younger siblings. She remembered standing back-to-back with that man as waves of undead surged around them, countless heroes clashing in the chaos, and a certain paladin single-handedly holding the line against overwhelming numbers. Another gentle growl from the little dragon pulled her from the memory. The dragon protested that it was not going to get excited about meeting him again, and the golden-haired woman with blue eyes in the garden raised a brow at the exchange between the sister and the child dragon. Elsewhere in Japan, in a different quiet room, a figure sat cross-legged and breathed slowly, candles forming a small circle around them. A red-scaled dragon lay indolently on a fluffy bed nearby as thunder rolled across the gray sky and the figure's eyes opened. Back in a sunlit living room, birds outside sang as soft sunlight slipped into the house. Water ran from the faucet while a young man with brown hair opened an oven and let the scent of fresh bread fill the room. A small green-scaled dragon the size of a dog sat on the countertop and looked up at him with crimson eyes. Issei smiled and acknowledged the dragon, ruffling its head and noting how hard it was to believe Drago was already more than a decade old yet still behaved like a child. Issei's mother called out for him from another room, and he greeted her with a smile. She started at the sight in the kitchen, clearly surprised. Issei winced, realizing he had forgotten to tell her about some things. The dragon made a low growl of impatience. A floating spirit, its form like colored ice and wearing partial armor, grinned and told him that he had said to pass the information along. Issei's mother jumped and blurted that it looked like a ghost. Issei reassured her that Aegis was not a ghost. Then, reacting to the dragon, his mother exclaimed that it was a lizard. The child dragon responded with a high-pitched growl, making its feelings obvious. Issei sighed as his father entered the living room and prepared to explain the situation. Goro asked to get the facts straight. Issei had gone missing for half a month during summer break, then been sent to another world where he lived for almost a decade and a half. Issei shrugged and explained that it was technically around a decade. He rubbed the scaly back of the green baby dragon on his lap with one hand while holding a cup of coffee in the other. Aegis floated by his side reading a book. Aegis noted that it had taken Issei 5 years to free himself from Jania's spell, a point the baby dragon punctuated with a soft chirp and a little puff of smoke from its nostrils. Issei told his parents that he had become a hero there and learned to use magic, though he insisted he was more of a spellcaster than a traditional mage. He set the now-empty coffee cup on the table and admitted that he had been used to having Drago with him and had forgotten to tell them. Mickey asked whether that explained why he had been sneaking out at night. Issei confirmed that Kuo had many magical signatures and that he had gone to investigate. When Goro asked whether he meant magic, monsters, and yokai, Issei replied that a friend from Earth he had met in that world had filled him in, but that some things were better left unspoken. Mickey studied her son closely and asked if he was all right. Goro thanked him for telling them everything and expressed how proud he was that their 16-year-old son, an incoming second-year high school student, had become a hero and helped others despite everything he had endured. Issei admitted it had been rough at first. An old Dragonlord had taken him in and trained him before he passed away. He fell silent for a moment, then smiled at the bundle of green scales in his lap. Seeing the look of fondness on their son's face and the way the dragon looked back at him, Mickey felt a warm pride and thought about how much he had been through. Issei credited both Drago and Aegis for helping him survive. He turned to the floating spirit and explained that Aegis was not a ghost but an elemental spirit, a former human and soul weaver who had died. Aegis was his sole ally and one of his best friends. Aegis introduced himself to Issei's parents as the elemental spirit of valor and thanked them for raising their son as an honest young man, adding a light-hearted remark about Issei's quirks. The baby dragon chirped and growled softly in approval. The family banter continued in a playful way about Issei's youthful antics. Mickey teased him about his old habits, and Goro asked whether he had any girlfriends yet, referring to his earlier boast about creating a harem. Issei blushed and protested, covering the baby dragon's ears with hurried hands. Aegis and the dragon exchanged amused looks. Aegis recounted that Issei had a tendency to embarrass himself around many people during his travels, including some notable figures. Issei protested at the retelling, but his parents laughed, enjoying the stories. The baby dragon chirped excitedly whenever a famous name came up. When Mickey asked about an empress, the dragon on Issei's lap emitted excited chirps and happy growls. Issei reacted with alarm and embarrassment, warning his family that the empress was angry with him. Goro encouraged Aegis to tell the tale, but Issei pleaded for them not to. The room filled with laughter and affectionate teasing as the family enjoyed the rare, relaxed moment together, their conversation returning to quieter reflections on Issei's journey and the unlikely bonds he had formed. Issei glanced at the crimson spirit by his side and teased that it might embarrass him too. The blood-red, masculine spirit replied that it might, and it might not. Issei reminded the spirits that Aegis, Drago, and Elpis had followed him here and that although he bore the scars, his body was the same as before he arrived in lore. The red spirit observed that, as he was now, he was only a pale imitation of his prime, the hero of Falconreach. Another spirit smiled and expressed confidence that Issei would be able to succeed. Elpis, the elemental spirit of hope and an unofficial soul ally of his, was white as snow, with a scar on its nose that made his heart ache. 6 arms decorated Elpis's form, the middle pair holding a small cube. Issei asked Elpis to watch over his parents, explaining that his father usually worked all day and his mother stayed at home. Elpis agreed to keep them safe. The blood-red spirit announced that it would return to the plane of elemental spirits and faded from sight. Elpis murmured that it did not trust the spirit, worried about the way it wove its influence. Issei sighed and reassured Elpis, then mentioned that the spirit could still bond with him. Elpis explained gently that, as much as it would like to, Issei already had 2 soul allies and that forming another bond would weaken his soul too much. With his current state, even using spells would be difficult, and bonding with more than one elemental spirit was a heavy burden. Elpis promised to remain by his side. One of his friends asked why Issei had not told his parents that he had been trying to find out whether the others had returned. Another friend exclaimed in surprise, and then one of them teased that Issei must be late. Issei panicked at the warning and hurried into his uniform, a soul-woven white shirt he had made after returning from lore. Elpis took his school bag and handed it to him. Issei called out that he was going to school and told his parents to behave, and he told Draco, the baby dragon, to be good. The baby dragon chirped as Issei finished, putting on his shoes. He told the living room that he was heading out, then noticed the faces of the friends he had made and smiled briefly. One friend promised to take care of Draco, and his parents wished him well. In a blink, Issei was suddenly outside the house. Outside, Issei asked Elpis if it was thinking the same thing about the many cameras and observers in the area. Elpis warned that it was risky. A small grin crossed Issei's face as a soft glow gathered around him, and he launched into motion. Invisible cyan streaks tore through walls and buildings as he ran as fast as he could, stopping at a park near his school and realizing with a gasp how poor his cardio had become. He steadied himself with a breath and opened his eyes, revealing a pair of focused orbs. Elpis told him they were close, and Issei replied that he knew. Stepping out of the woods, he brushed dust from his shoulder and closed his eyes to synchronize his soul to the beat of the world, a unique skill he had learned after meeting a great dragon and acquiring an elemental orb. Dragon magic had become his favored discipline alongside soul weaving, well suited to his role as a Dragonlord. Magical energy circulated through him, filling his body as he used a technique he had once seen a friend employ while training an apprentice and the child of a friend. He felt his reserves refill with each breath as light and shadow inside him worked to heal and rebalance. For a moment his eyes shifted through strange colors before settling back to normal. Elpis commented on how fascinating it was that he had balanced the scales, then said it must go to protect his father and urged him to stay safe. Issei thanked Elpis. Turning toward the academy, the young Dragonlord walked with a small hum, unaware that a pair of widened amber eyes watched him from the shadows. A small form trembled in the darkness as he vanished from view. Issei was greeted by a chorus of voices as he returned to campus. Moto and Matsu called his name, and nearby students made playful remarks about the group being reunited. His friends crowded around, asking where he had been and urging him to join them for new releases and snacks. Issei shrugged and declined, saying he had other things to do. He still had a reputation for mischief, but the battles he had faced in another world had tempered him, and his body and magic needed serious training. He thought about the information his friend in lore had given him and how it had opened his mind to what lay ahead. The subtle shifts in magic were palpable as many supernatural beings moved through the school. He reminded himself that he also needed to check on those strange chess-like creatures he had learned about. He told his friends he had responsibilities to take care of, including serving as a model for his dragon to emulate. If he had to change his habits for that, he would. Conversation shifted to the old church being rebuilt. His friends joked and speculated about who might come. From the church, Issei allowed himself a brief daydream of a warm memory, a young woman dressed in white and gold, laughing like silver bells, whose tea and gentle manner had welcomed his dragon hatchlings in Sunbreeze Grove. The memory reinforced why he wanted to grow stronger. Aika appeared, and Issei greeted her with a smile. She once inspired fear in him, but that feeling had long since been replaced by the far greater terrors of his adventures. Aika looked him over with a teasing expression and remarked on how different he seemed. Her tone was playful rather than accusatory. The surrounding students reacted with mixed surprise and exasperation at Issei's changed reputation. Genshiro Saji, a new member of the student council, handed Issei a letter that shimmered faintly with energy magic. Issei sensed hints of elemental attunement in the residue and, passing a small thread of dragon magic through his eyes, read the neat cursive message. The letter contained a single line: "Found you, doomed Dragonlord." Issei thought it could only be from one person, one of the few who had once held a wind orb besides him. After the first day of classes, Issei walked across the academy with a single purpose. His friends, ordinary though eager, followed him. When he reached the kendo dojo, he paused at the entrance and caught a wooden spear someone had tossed to him. Inside, the kendo club members watched as a young woman in kendo armor sat patiently in seiza without a helmet, her presence commanding and intense. Issei noted to himself that her presence was the kind that had earned her the title Empress of the Storms. He entered the dojo and removed his shoes. The woman rose, announced Issei's name and reputation as a shadow of the wind, then placed her helmet on. Issei teased her about being so eager. She replied that if he could defeat her, she would accept his invitation to dinner. He accepted the challenge with a grin and an easy flourish of his wooden spear. The two clashed, wooden weapon against wooden weapon, with practiced skill and speed. Their sparring resembled a dance, a choreography of winds and storms, each blow parried and answered with precise timing. The kendo club watched in awed silence as both fighters moved through a realm of their own focus. The instructor whispered in amazement at the depth of their technique. Minutes passed with neither gaining a decisive advantage. Eventually Issei found himself at a disadvantage. Breathing heavily, he dropped his spear and acknowledged defeat when the wooden sword was briefly at his throat. Applause filled the hall as the woman lowered her sword and removed her helmet, revealing purple hair damp with sweat and a flushed, determined face. She complimented his solid defense and teased him about his stamina, and the two shared a moment of light, bell-like laughter. The Sovereign of Storms approached the Dragonlord with a soft hum and observed that it was not a bad thing that the two of them were closer than the others. The Dragonlord teased whether that sounded like jealousy. The Sovereign denied it, and the Dragonlord accused the Sovereign of daring to use his own spells against him. It was a beautiful day. Birds sang and flowers bloomed. At Kuo Academy, Issei Hyoudou, known as one of the school's notorious troublemakers, slept peacefully beside a young woman in a student uniform. She held a science book far beyond their grade and age and glanced at it between moments of quiet study. They had been studying together between classes. Students who recognized Issei gaped in disbelief at the sight, and a few shouted accusations and jeers. The young woman checked her watch, noting that there were 5 minutes before class, and gently tapped Issei to wake him, reminding him that class was about to start. Issei's red eyes opened, flat and unreadable at first before softening to brown. He pushed himself up and formed a small magical circle in his mind, snapping himself fully awake. Mei smiled and told him that, despite appearances, he excelled at dragon magic more than many of the others. Issei thought back to becoming a Dragonlord earlier than most and to the personal instruction he had received from Lady Celestia, a demanding mentor whose lessons left a lasting impression. Images of a woman in white robes and the challenges of handling a young dragon crossed his mind. Mei ribbed him about his tendency to get into trouble with dragons, and he asked her to stop teasing him. He reminded her that her lightning affinity had a habit of singling him out, and she laughed, giving his shoulder a playful punch. Memories of their younger days surfaced. A younger Issei in Dragonlord armor entering her study only to be struck by a comical bolt of lightning against his chest plate, and a picnic where a small shock surprised him when he tried to cover her eyes. It was hard for both of them to believe those moments were already more than a decade behind them. With surprising agility, Issei performed a kick-up and offered his hand to Mei. She accepted, feeling the familiar warmth and strength of his grip, and reminded him that he had asked for tutoring and could not complain. He protested that he did not enjoy theoretical subjects, but Mei pointed out that fighting threats without hesitation only made it more important for him to learn the theory as well as the practice. As Issei passed her, he mumbled an apology for not being a bookworm. Mei made clear that she had heard him, and the students around them reacted with renewed surprise. Matsu and Motohama called Issei by name, their voices carrying the familiar mix of concern and accusation. Keitei slammed his desk and added his own pointed question as he glanced toward Mei Raiden's desk, which was crowded with classmates. Issei looked up, met the Empress of Thunder's eyes, and felt the usual softness there that had grown between them since they became friends. Issei explained that Mei and he were friends and sparring partners, recalling how their relationship had been rocky at first after they first teamed up during his hunt for the elemental orb of wind. He admitted she had resented some of his earlier behavior, but they had worked through it. He also mentioned, matter-of-factly, that he had clashed with pirates and ninjas on several occasions and had often come away with little to show for it. The two friends demanded to know if he had done anything wrong to Mei. Motohama stepped in to defend Issei, insisting that despite his reputation, he would never force himself on anyone. Matsuda, glaring at the others, added that poking curious fun did not mean they would cross lines. Issei made a light joke about an old-school secret they had discovered long ago to ease the tension. Mei, stern but not unsympathetic, warned him about drinking, and Issei reassured everyone that it was only root beer. Mei then vouched for him in a calm, certain tone. She acknowledged his flirtatious reputation but insisted he respected people's boundaries, a conviction that quieted several skeptical faces and brought a few memories of awkward teenage flirting to mind. Issei allowed himself a theatrical confession. He admitted to being a flirt and to appreciating beauty, but he emphasized that he would never pressure anyone. He exaggerated the drama in good humor, rising to his feet and adopting a mock orator stance. The performance drew laughter and a few playful cheers from classmates who admired his confidence and charisma rather than anything inappropriate. Motohama and Matsuda rose with him, adopting the same joking bravado and calling for mutual support among their circle. Their rallying ended with a chorus of light-hearted agreement from nearby students and even one hesitant compliment from Saji. Sauna Shirtorai, the student council president, entered the classroom with a furrowed brow and immediately ordered detention for the disturbance. As she approached, a faint trickle of magic leaked from her, and Issei's expression sharpened. Years as a ninja had taught him to hide reactions. He noted the demonic edge to the aura but kept his face steady. He stepped down from his desk and faced the president. Sauna's sharp observation about the color of his aura earned a wry response from Issei, and she called him out for his behavior while a soft blush rose across her face. He complimented her in return before following her and two student council members down the hall in silence. Inside the student council room, Issei's eyes scanned the ornate glass chest set on the coffee table. He recognized something unusual about the pieces, an enchanted, disciplined quality that reminded him, in abstract, of how necromancers bound souls to objects, except these felt like they had been shaped into elemental constructs. He felt a familiar mental tap from Mei checking in on him. She asked if he was all right. He responded that he was fine and noted Aegis was nearby as he watched the bespectacled student sit on the couch beside the chessboard. Sauna invited Issei to take a seat and said she had questions for him, then asked whether he played chess. He shrugged and admitted he had some idea of how to play. She opened the conversation by asking about the events before he had disappeared. Issei explained that he and his friends had just finished buying some supplies when they separated. He recounted taking a long walk in the park to relax, finding an old book on a bench, and noticing a single black feather fall nearby, like a crow's. As the two moved pieces across the board, he captured one of her pawns and kept his eyes on her while answering. Issei scowled as one of his chess pieces was captured and explained that he had woken up in an unfamiliar place. A member of the student council suggested he should have reported it to the police, and Issei replied that perhaps he should have said that to them instead as he lowered a piece onto a tile. He then observed that Sauna Shirtorai was not a bad disguise. Weapons and glowing magic circles sprang into being around the room as the student council members glared at the notorious troublemaker. Sona Citri noted that anyone familiar with the occult would see the family name was close to the disguise and asked when he had discovered it. Issei smiled and said that after returning from wherever that place was, he had studied the occult and found plenty of information online. He casually praised a member of Sona's family for being a captivating celebrity. Sona ordered her peerage to stand down. Issei grinned and announced check as many of her pieces vanished from the board. Sona accused him of cheating and demanded the pieces be returned. Issei shrugged and pointed out that she had turned away. A commander must never let their guard down, he said. Sona shot him a sharp look and then, a little more formally, invited Issei to join her peerage. She watched her members' shocked faces and saw Tsubaki's subtle shake of the head, noting that even Tsubaki had not noticed the trick. Issei declined the offer, saying he was not interested in joining a faction he knew nothing about. He moved several pieces and declared checkmate. Silence fell over the student council chamber as Sona examined the board. Her king was boxed in by too many pieces and, with her disappeared pieces and the board position, there was no way out. For the first time, Sona had been defeated. She whispered that she had lost and complimented Issei on the game. Tsubaki quietly echoed that President Sona had lost. Issei snapped his fingers as he left. A faint blanket of light lifted from the chessboard, restoring it to the exact arrangement it had held before he had taken the pieces. He said he wanted all his previous violations wiped from his record and then departed. Hanakai Momo studied the traces of magic and identified the illusion. Sona explained that it had been a minor charm rooted in darkness-aligned elements combined with a small invisibility effect that rendered pieces undetectable to their senses. She smiled at the simplicity and effectiveness of the trick. Technically, she still sat in place and Issei had walked away, but as a tactician she had lost to him even while he was under the scrutiny of her peerage. In her excitement over the demonstration of his magic, Sona suddenly remembered the stipulation in her engagement contract. Anyone who could defeat her at chess would become formally betrothed to her. Her expression froze as the implications settled over her. A council member stepped forward to call attention to the situation. Mei asked if he had made contact with the devils of Kuo as she opened the pot in the Hyoudou household. Her long purple hair was tied with a ribbon into a ponytail as she worked alongside Miki Hyu. Issei, the Dragonlord of Doom, studied the floating book before him. The copy of the legendary Eggnonomicon, the greatest spellbook of cryomancers, had been thought destroyed by the pyromancer Zan during a frost vow years ago, but Issei had found a copy in his bag a while back. Issei confirmed that he had dealt with House Citri. Mei then reported to Miki that her father had told her the current Satan Leviathan was the sister of the current heir, and Mei added that this news was promising. Miki smiled and thanked her as Mei took a sip from the stew. Mei teased that the stew was better than anything Issei could make, and a bundle of green scales and a red and black drake growled in agreement. Issei scolded the dragons with a glare and explained that he had finished putting up some seals in the house. They were not as strong as those on Sunbreeze Grove, and he did not want to use any forbidden magic. Mei reassured him that with either Draco or Aegis present, Miki would be safe, and she began cooking more food. Mei confirmed that she had moved to Kuo to reunite with the others and had gone there first because she only knew Issei's specific location. Miki invited her to stay, mentioning they had a free guest room. Issei thought it was a good idea, remembering how both he and the Empress of Thunder had lived in his castle and how sharing space with another Dragonlord had eased his loneliness. Draco could also play with Kurikara. Mei bowed politely and accepted the offer, and Issei chuckled at her gesture. Issei mentioned that he had found a mage connected to one of the monsters he had fought a few nights earlier. The mage used an energy-based grimoire. Miki and Mei told him to put the books away, giving him a stern look. Mei added, with nervous amusement, that at least it was not scandalous material this time. Mickey smiled and remarked that Issei would be in good hands. Mickey announced that someone had returned home, removed her apron, and hurried to the door. Issei advised preparing some soundproofing later, noting that things could get loud, and May teased that he was speaking from experience. Issei admitted reluctantly that he was. May playfully pulled at his cheek and teased him, and Issei joked that his girlfriend would get jealous. A sudden commotion from another room caused everyone to blush, and Mickey scolded those involved to keep personal matters private. A brief pause followed to allow the household to settle. Later, a young woman in a habit with white hair peeking out announced that she and her companion were heading out. The white-haired sister received thanks from a blonde woman for letting her stay. A tall blonde in casual clothes told them to take care and offered warm words to Bella. The smaller blonde held a small bundle of golden scales that chirped cheerfully in her arms. The beautiful melody echoed through the halls of the old abandoned church in Kuro. Countless bodies lay scattered across the floor, and soft groans of the injured filled the space. A lone figure paused the song and turned. He was a man with silver hair, dressed like a businessman. He remarked that he did not expect anyone else to use the church. As he turned, another man entered the chapel without concern, and the bodies on the floor rose to their feet. Issei Hyoudou assessed the scene and recognized necromancy at work. He noted that necromancers had arrived in Kuo. The newcomer addressed him with a challenge, proclaiming that Issei would become one of his puppets and serve as a step toward conquest. Issei stepped out of the shadows and let the moonlight reveal his face. He observed that necromancers typically used graveyards as their lairs, then took a seat on a bench and rested his feet on the backrest in a casual posture. The necromancer introduced himself as Deathsbane Morgan and warned Issei against disrespect, claiming academic credentials and pride in his craft. Issei, unimpressed by the theatrics, asked him to get on with it. As the confrontation escalated, a shadow moved through the ranks of undead. Issei moved with swift precision, appearing from one shadow to the next in a rapid sequence that disarmed and incapacitated a portion of Deathsbane's minions. The necromancer's disbelief was obvious as Issei continued his approach. A condensed blast of magic burst from a revolver and struck the necromancer's arc of defense. Issei's blade met the ward and then drove through it, hitting Deathsbane. The necromancer collapsed, and Issei directed his magic to neutralize the threat and draw the necromantic energy from the fallen man. Issei then ordered the undead to clean the church. Instead of attacking, the reanimated figures gathered rags and worked quickly to restore the chapel, removing traces of the disturbance. He reflected on the string of supernatural incidents he had encountered recently and frowned at the idea of someone setting up shop on holy ground. Kneeling beside one of the fully still bodies, he found a scratched sigil on an amulet and recognized it as the mark of a rogue exorcist. He made a mental note about the unexpected connection. A ringtone interrupted him. Issei answered the call from May, fellow Dragonlord. He told her that he had dealt with a necromancer and described the situation briefly. May asked him to pick up groceries and some desserts on his way home. Issei agreed and thanked her. May said she had already finished cooking. As Issei watched the undead move with surprising efficiency to finish cleaning, a surge of magic echoed through the chapel. The feeling in the air was unmistakable. A portal spell anchored to a magic circle, the sort often associated with devilish power. Issei prepared to leave. He focused his childhood memories and a practiced burst of magic along the edge of his sword. With a single slash, a small rift opened. Corrupted orbs and bats of darkness swirled around him as he stepped through and vanished. Back at the Hyoudou household, the Dragonlord of Storms stood in casual clothes with an apron and asked about Issei's night. Issei explained that he had encountered a necromancer and clarified that it was not their usual undead hunting weekend. He removed his coat and hung it by the door. The Dragonlord of Storms sighed and teased that Issei could be as troublesome as a friend named Ardix. Issei protested mildly, saying he was not that bad. The Empress of Storms chimed in with a playful remark about teasing topics they often ribbed each other about, and the conversation turned light as they settled in for the evening. They were called the Great Sages of the female form. May asked where their parents were. Issei replied that their parents had gone out. Mei acknowledged this with a quiet sound. Issei noted that their parents might have felt awkward because Draco and Kurikara had more powerful senses. Mei conceded that her castle was large. She reminded him to behave, and Issei replied obediently. Mei then told him that her father wanted to meet him. Issei shrugged as he poured himself a cup of tea and expressed mild surprise. Mei explained that her father knew she had been transported to Lore along with many others and wanted to meet Issei personally. Issei glanced at his journal and checked his schedule, noting he had some training after school. Mei said her father would be visiting Kuo that Sunday for a business deal. Issei asked when they could meet and offered to host him instead of a hotel. The Dragonlord of Doom produced a grimoire bearing a dragon sigil and set stacks of tomes on the coffee table. Mei suggested they should tell her aunt and uncle. Issei said he would inform them but joked that they might assume the visit meant marriage. Mei teased him about getting married and mentioned the risk of provoking a certain Dragonlord. Issei, leaning back on the couch as the grimoire floated open before him, declined the idea. He admitted that he was a more powerful Dragonlord than most, but Mei pointed out that a battle was more than raw power. She teased him about spending too much time with Notha. He defended Notha as cool and helpful. Mei accused him of going through a balancing phase and he apologized. When Mei asked about dessert and groceries, Issei realized he had forgotten and claimed he had only wanted to see her first. Mei, unconvinced by his lie, told him to go buy the missing items. Mei turned the stove off and shut the gas connection herself. Issei offered to come with her, warning she should expect him to empty her wallet that night. Mei accepted with a resigned sigh, both looking forward to sweets and time together. Issei often found himself on the receiving end of Mei's displeasure. Sometimes she ignored him or kept him from the dinner table, though she never took her anger out on Draco and often left him food preserved by stasis spells. It was usually his fault. He had caused awkward accidents before, which sometimes upset Mei, and he had once ruined a set of new soul-woven clothes she had made with Tomix's help. He also had a habit of making late-night bar rounds with Valencia that sometimes left him stuck in odd situations after promising to be back for dinner. Fortunately, desserts could usually smooth things over, and Mei's mood would shift depending on how often such incidents occurred. With a snap of his fingers and a minor application of transdimensional magic, Issei changed into a new set of clothes. A white button-up shirt replaced his black one, and the dragon amulet given by his former mentor rested against his chest. The crimson jewel glowed, reflecting the true nature of his beloved dragon. He smiled at Mei, and for an instant his form flickered. His eyes flashed red against dark sclerae and strands of white danced through his hair. Mei noticed the change and frowned. Issei Hyoudou was known as the fabled hero of destiny and the Dragonlord of Doom, famed for combining Dragonlord power with mastery of dragonslaying after defeating the Great Dragon of Fire. His affinity for magic was restrained by something only hinted at. On the battlefield, flames roared as a colossal infernal giant threatened to engulf Lore. The Dragonlords of Falconreach, the Mad Pyromancer, and the future Archmagus of the Rose joined forces. Three unlikely allies fought the infernal creature, which seemed to contain a fragment of someone they knew. Their comrades focused on restraining the Titan while Draco, moving with the fluidity of a dragon, struck and wove between attacks, pulsing with primal water as he opened dimensional rifts to return the infernal assaults. Mei assured Issei that she was fine with a small, warm smile before she and the others left, asking Kurikara and Draco to behave in their absence. The dragons of doom and energy growled, and the Dragonlords opened the door. Their walk was silent but comfortable. For over a decade, Issei and Mei had fought side by side. Despite his mischievous reputation, Issei would go to the ends of the world for those he cared about. Issei opened the door wearing his dread pirate armor, which doubled as a costume, and Draco perched on his shoulder under an illusion that made him look like a parrot. He smiled at the sight of a pink-clad magical girl costume that he recognized from Milky Spiral and felt a rush of excitement. Livia struck a cute pose, introduced herself as Magical Girl Livia, and chose Trick with a playful wink. Issei answered by forming a delicate flower of ice with his dragon magic. From inside, someone called out to their sister and Sona Citri, dressed in a light blue version of a magical girl outfit, froze when she looked at the pirate-themed young man at the door. Issei tilted his head and smirked as a magically propelled vase nearly struck him. He then announced that, as his trick for receiving no candy, he would be taking Livia. Livia grinned, hopped into his arms in a playful gesture, and waved farewell to Sona as she was carried away. Sona, furious, vowed revenge and unleashed a sweeping wave of magical energy. Issei ran off laughing loudly while opening a flask, Draco giving him a deadpan look from his shoulder. In the shadows, a nearby ninja watched the scene and shook her head at the antics of her fellow Dragonlord and close friend. Kiana smiled and announced that they had finally arrived in Japan, calling it the land of the beautiful May. She was dressed like a nun, and her blue eyes sparkled. Asia, the blonde, blushed and asked Kiana to keep her voice down, fidgeting as she looked at the crowds around them. Kiana reassured Asia, patting her head with a gloved hand and noting that she had already arranged their ride to Kuo. She said they had a lot to see there and could squeeze in some time while they repaired the church. Irina, the twin-tailed orange-haired sister, offered to show them around Kuo since it had been a while since she had been there. Kiana reminded Irina and Asia that they should wear the uniform over their robes and not only the robes themselves. Asia protested that it was merely a trial of faith, while the hooded sister agreed that they had no reason to draw attention. Kiana muttered that they were being impractical and needed to blend in. Asia objected to Kiana's tone, and Irina teased that Asia understood them. Zenobia, the white-haired sister, sighed and warned that they were headed into devil territory and had to avoid provoking trouble. She reminded them that they were on a special mission. The others agreed to be careful. Kiana then asked where Bella was. The little girl of 7 appeared with a bright smile, pale eyes, and soft white gold hair. Bella greeted Irina, Asia, and Zenobia and said that she could sense familiar friends nearby, naming them excitedly. Zenobia noted that they would likely run into those friends soon. Bella leaned into Zenovia's palm, and Kiana felt a sudden rush of longing as she thought of the people the child spoke of, the leader of their group and the second in command, the friends she missed. A sharp-witted sister who had once been too short to reach things, a sweet younger sister who reminded her of Asia, a mischievous Dragonlord who was often involved in chaotic events and happened to be a close friend, and her beloved Dragonlord. Irina hummed and said she could not wait to meet Issei again. Kiana asked whether Irina actually knew Issei, looking at the wielder of Excalibur Mimic, one of the fragments of the original Excalibur. Irina explained that as far as she knew, Issei had never left Japan and that her father still kept in touch with Uncle Goru. Bella brightened and spoke of Issei fondly, remembering that he had taught both Kiana and another sister many things and that he had been one of the first people she saw after hatching. Kiana, feeling a mixture of fondness and caution, quietly told Bella to keep such things secret and reminded the child that she had a reputation to protect. Bella apologized cheerfully and promised to be careful. Irina offered that she still knew where Issei's old residence was, but Kiana thanked her and explained that finding him could wait. Securing the church came first. She reported that there were ongoing signs of fallen angel activity inside Kuro, with affiliations to Kokabeel. Kiana cautioned that it was likely their enemies already suspected they were headed to Kuo and instructed everyone to be careful and avoid suspicious behavior. As they hailed a taxi outside the airport, she reflected that the peaceful days they had known would be fading. Her instincts, honed by years of service to the church and adventuring, told her that trouble was brewing ahead. Far away, the Dragonlord of Doom sneezed lightly and dropped his cone of ice cream onto the floor. He watched the treat crumble and, disappointed, accepted a spoonful offered by the Dragonlord of Storms. May held a small tub of ice cream and smiled as she offered to share, and Issei thanked her with tears forming at the corners of his eyes. Outside, the Occult Research Club watched the two Dragonlords. Kaneko sensed a strong scent of magic and ruin drifting from the church, and she told Rias that the source smelled like the second-year student standing nearby. Rias weighed her options. A magician capable of confronting a priest and a band of exorcists alone might be an asset or a threat, and the presence of the young woman beside him complicated things. She stepped into the store and approached Issei to introduce herself, but he ignored her to continue his conversation with the transfer student. Rias noted that the two clearly knew and trusted each other. His attention never wavered toward her. Issei apologized for the interruption when Rias attempted a small illusion to speak privately, and his expression changed. His eyes flared red and a cold, shadowy power gathered around him. The air tightened and an unsettling presence brushed past the students, dredging up dark memories for each of them. Kaneko remembered her sister's madness, Yudo Kiba recalled the painful experiments of the Holy Sword Project, and Akino Himejima thought of the night her mother was killed. Rias, who had lived a sheltered life as an heiress, felt a chill she had never known before. Mei stepped beside Issei and spoke quietly, placing a calming hand on his arm. Her gesture steadied him, and the tension in his eyes ebbed. Issei then softened his expression and withdrew the more intense display of power. Rias made a formal apology and composed herself with practiced grace, but she could not deny that the danger now seemed to stem more from the transfer student than from Issei. Yudo Kiba moved forward to stand protectively in front of her, and when he saw the newcomer he realized at once that she was a swordswoman of exceptional skill and imposing presence that made him feel outmatched. Rias explained that they were there to get desserts, not pick fights, and Mei's calming presence reinforced the intention to keep things civil. Issei relaxed, and they agreed to sit together and talk. After a short time and a small tub of ice cream, Issei, with Mei at his side and Akino and Rias opposite, began to answer questions about the church. Rias asked about the scent Kaneko had detected there, and Kaneko confirmed that she had tracked it to the scene. Mei murmured in the dragon tongue that the tracking had been sloppy. Issei told them that he had been at home with Mei, and then casually draped an arm around his friend in a familiar, friendly gesture. Mei gently redirected the moment with a small movement to keep things appropriate, and Kaneko showed obvious discomfort at the display. When the conversation turned to living arrangements, Mei responded calmly that she did not care what others thought about the people she trusted, glancing at Issei with a steady look that said more than words. The group settled into a cautious but civil discussion about the events at the church and what they might mean. Mei admitted that Issei was a pervert but that she trusted him with her life. Issei murmured Mei's name. Mei added that she also knew how to make him behave, so she was fine. The Dragonlord of Doom always made sure to tease her as much as he could. Issei asked whether it was because of all the puns, and Mei replied that maybe. Issei invoked the equilibrium in mock exasperation. Issei leaned his back against the couch and let a magic circle float before him as he inscribed new symbols, thinking about the problem of stray devils. The Dragonlord of Storms admitted that his father's information about devilkind was limited and that Kiana had shared much but not the level of detail she wanted. Issei noted aloud that a civil war had taken place in the underworld 500 years ago and that dragons had been involved. The young Dragonlord of Doom fell silent at the mention of dragons. As Dragonlords, their duty was to deepen bonds between dragons and mortals, yet there were gaps in what they knew. Draco met Issei's brown eyes with his own red gaze, and the dragon's presence kept the room balanced between warmth and quiet tension. Issei murmured that it had been a long time since he had hunted a dragon. The Dragonlord of Storms and the Energy Dragon both grew uneasy, not because they feared harm but because they trusted Issei's skill with dragons and the ruthless efficiency he could display when needed. His training under the Dragonslayer Galanoth had been harsh and humbling. Issei had initially been overwhelmed by the power and experience of the great dragon of fire, Akraloth. Only later, after conversations with their mentor Lady Celestia and the High Priestess of Dragons, did they learn that Akraloth had once been served by Dragonlords. The memory of the Great Fire War remained vivid. Issei had faced Akraloth in single combat and emerged victorious, wielding a reforged legendary weapon of ice against the fire-empowered dragon. The duel had been intense and world-shaping, an event that cemented Issei's reputation as a Dragonlord and revealed a side of him that prioritized the kill in order to protect others. The battle had been fierce and left lasting consequences on the balance of elemental powers. It had also left scars on Issei that showed whenever he allowed himself to relax. Issei listed the other threats they needed to consider: the Student Council, the Occult Research Club, fallen and rogue church agents in the city, and the stray devils hiding in their midst. Mei added that stray devils were present here as well, reinforcing the breadth of the problem. Issei summoned Aegis, his first soul ally and one of his closest companions. He prepared himself to be blunt with the elemental spirit, confessing that he understood if their bond should be broken, because Issei expected to be responsible for many deaths in the coming conflict. Aegis smiled and refused, declaring that as Issei's sole ally he would remain at his side and would not mind being a corrupted elemental spirit so long as he could share in Issei's adventures. Issei smiled at the memory of the elemental spirit's mortal form, how it had once protected his parents on their date and introduced him to the art of soul weaving. Aegis had become a mentor and a brother in all but blood. Mei approached Issei from behind and wrapped her arms around him, reminding him not to forget her and promising to always stand at his side. Issei softened and thanked her, and Mei sat down beside him after loosening her ponytail. She suggested a quiet movie night to avoid repeating past misadventures with Maya, and Issei's eyes lit up with playful anticipation. Mei teased that he should behave or there would be no cuddling tonight, and she leaned her head on his shoulder with a laugh. Their exchange was warm and teasing, a comfortable intimacy rather than anything overt. When Issei playfully accused Mei of being the one who had been affectionate with the idiot, she shot back with mock indignation and told him to choose the movie. He obliged. Kurikara and Draco let out soft growls, earning a glare from Issei. As the film played on, Issei relaxed. The flickering light revealed the battle-worn scars that crossed his body and the silver streaks that had worked their way into his brown hair over the years. The Hyoudou matriarch and patriarch announced their return, followed by the faint presence of the elemental spirit of hope. Mikihai gasped softly at the sight of her son, Issei asleep on the couch with white streaks in his hair, Mei asleep against his shoulder, Draco curled on his lap, and Kurikara resting near Mei like a small, watchful cat. Aegis explained that Issei and Mei had fallen asleep a while back. Seeing Issei at peace and free of nightmares warmed the elemental spirit's heart. Miki smiled and lifted her phone to capture the moment. She cherished having someone close to her son. Issei had always been honest, if sometimes irreverent, and both she and her husband had done their best to raise him. She felt pride in the life he had built and in the unusual new addition to the family, a dragon grandchild sleeping contentedly in his lap. Moved by curiosity and pride, Miki asked Aegis to explain soul weaving, saying she and her husband wanted to learn so they could better bond with Issei. Aegis warned gently that soul weaving had a cost and that it carried interesting side effects, but he agreed to share what he could. Elpis, the elemental spirit of hope, floated closer and offered to help explain as well. The elemental spirit of hope explained to the parents of his unofficial soul ally that the art of soul weaving had been founded by the first weaver, Ruar. The elemental spirit of duality remained silent as it watched Hope and Valor describe soul weaving, noting that it was to be expected because Pandora's soul had been intertwined with the corrupted elemental spirit Greed and with the remnants of Tomix Dineo's soul. At the gate of the city of Kuo, Kiana Kaslana, flanked by a girl with golden white hair, walked toward the restaurant where she was to meet a contact. She barely noticed a presence and bumped into the person, then apologized and called out Mei's name before tackling her into an affectionate embrace. Mei wrapped her arms around Kiana with tears in her eyes. While she spent a lot of time close to Issei, she was closest to Kiana in their group and had missed her terribly. Across the square, at a nearby cafe with a cup of coffee in hand, the Dragonlord of Doom watched the reunion discreetly. Elpis asked Issei if he was going to join them, but Issei chose to remain seated. Although he had a roguish streak and might have liked to witness the moment, he had deliberately sent Mei on an errand to bring her to Kiana first, and he did not want to intrude. Seeing the warmth of their interaction reminded him of those he had lost. He remembered Serenity, also known as Diana Valrith, the innkeeper of Falconreach who had supported him and given him room and board. She had died because of his mistake, and he blamed himself for not having destroyed that thing when he could have. The first close person he had lost had been his mentor in the arts of the Dragonlords, Lady Celestia, who died when undead forces and a mad pyromancer brought ruin during the Battle of Falconreach. A dark blade had struck him in that battle, leaving a long scar along his side and forcing him to reveal his true nature to the legendary Doom Knight. What cut him deepest was the loss of his best friend and brother, Tomix Dineo, the hero of Ravenloss and the creator of the first Chaos Weaver. 5 years sealed away in enchanted ice had ended with the discovery that Tomix was gone, his soul obliterated after a fall into a void core. Elpis himself was an amalgamation of many souls, including remnants of Tomix, but he was not the Tomix Issei had known, not the mentor who had taught him to be a battle weaver, not the friend who had planned a weaving academy in Ravenloss. In the end, Tomix was lost, and that loss had broken Issei. Issei watched the two friends with a small, genuine smile, pleased for them. The spirit on his arm had taken the form of a watch, a ring glinting on his finger, and for a moment his brown eyes shifted to a colder, distant blue. Aegis, the elemental spirit of valor and Issei's first soul ally, asked quietly if he was truly all right. Issei returned a calm smile and said he would be fine. He did not want to spoil the reunion. His eyes flickered through colors blue, green, red before settling. Issei told himself that the others would be all right. Their party consisted of extraordinary people: May Raiden, the daughter of a powerful businessman connected to the supernatural, and Kiana, whose family had long served the church. A faintly foreboding ring and necklace glinted on Issei as he watched the friends interact and felt something warm stir inside his otherwise guarded heart. They were fortunate, he thought. For a split second, an old memory resurfaced and his control slipped. Years of mastering his true nature let him suppress his necromantic aura most of the time, but occasionally it flickered loose. He recalled something he and a few others knew, a dangerous entity trapped within a mana core, something that even he and Draco could not defeat with conventional Lorraine magic or their favored arts. He remembered the way that entity had harmed someone he could not reach with ordinary spells and felt a chill at the thought of cracking the reality inside the mana core. A sudden sharp pain struck his mind. He cursed under his breath as images flashed, cascades of purple and green and a chaotic scene with 5 figures: a warrior, a mage, a rogue, a healer, and a man carrying a dragon's skull. The vision hinted at lords and chaos. Issei resolved that he needed to return to lore. He would have to regain his full power before attempting to close the portal between Earth and lore, to make the threat sleep or seal it permanently without relying on dangerous magic. He would learn, he would train, and he would prepare, studying a fool's spell that might provide a basis, learning from a mage who could generate vast stores of magic, and facing bitter enemies reborn in terrible forms. Until the time came to act, he would wait, watching and readying himself for what must be done. Issei had a close, affectionate, and playful relationship with May, though it remained largely platonic. He was also close to Lady Celestia, his mentor in the Dragonlord arts, who taught him how to care for Draco. He trusted her with his life. Tomix had become like a brother after they bonded over their shared outcast status at their academies and after Tomix had trusted Issei enough to teach him his version of weaving. Tomix's death during the Void Ship Saga had been one of the few times Issei had truly broken down in tears, and the Elpis he carried came from another timeline. Draco, his dragon, had been with him even longer than May and the others. Hurting Draco was the surest way to draw Issei's fury. When Draco was harmed, Issei's response was relentless. Issei was human and something more. Of his party, he was the most resilient and durable. May was the fastest, Kiana the strongest, and the others filled their roles with equal dedication. There were parts of Book 3 in which the girls were absent, such as the final stages of the End of Magic, because they remained in Falconreach and other locations to contain the threat. This left Issei with knowledge they did not have. During the Wrath of Wargoth, in a lull between clashes, Issei, hero of Falconreach, opened a rift to find a way back to Earth. Using Aegis to create an anchor back on lore, he cloaked his sword in celestial energy and sliced through reality. The cut revealed a passage to another dimension, and without hesitation the young Dragonlord stepped through. Reality shifted as soon as he passed the rift. He found himself facing a large green dragon radiating a strange, potent power. The presence was unmistakably chronomantic. This was a time dragon. Issei announced that he was exploring the rifts between dimensions. The dragon did not respond, only watched him. Not wanting to provoke it, Issei wrapped his blade again in celestial energy and opened another rift with a careful slash. Falling through dimensions, he watched countless realities blur past until he landed in a different world. There he saw a wind dragon writhing as if in pain. Issei moved to help, using everything he knew as a Dragonlord to soothe the creature. He noticed unusual crystalline growths on the dragon. At a touch, he felt a familiar echo of dragon magic around the corruption and suspected that another dragon had inflicted it. He admitted to himself that he was not a healer but believed he could ease the dragon's suffering. In a flash of cyan streaks, he approached, and the dragon rose, eyes blazing with pain and anger. It accused him of attempting an assassination, declaring itself Dvalin of the Four Winds. Issei explained that he meant no harm and tried to calm the dragon. When diplomacy failed, the Dragonlord changed form. His armor shifted and his eyes altered as he channeled Dragonslayer magic into his blade. The ensuing clash was swift and stylized, an intense, anime-like duel of light and motion. In the end, the corrupt crystals were shattered and stopped harming the dragon. After the fight, Issei removed his helmet and introduced himself as Issei, hero and Dragonlord of Falconreach, and asked the dragon to tell its story. Dvalin accepted the introduction, expressing gratitude for the help in clearing its mind. Back home, Issei greeted his parents, Draco, Kurikara, Elpis, Secundus, Aegis, and May. He mentioned that he had a date planned for Sunday. His father continued reading his newspaper and acknowledged the news in a calm tone, while his mother kept setting out food. May asked who the date was with, curious. Mickey, aware of how close May and Issei were, wondered if May was upset. May clarified that she and Issei were close friends but not romantically involved, smiling in a way that hid deeper feelings known only to Kurikara and the elemental spirits. The younger dragons remained quiet, respectful of the Dragonlord of Storm's disciplined demeanor. Issei explained that the closeness among his party had become habitual and that their physical familiarity did not imply a romantic relationship. He added, half-joking, that the date involved someone he described as a fallen angel, which alarmed his parents. May asked if he had enemies here, and Issei admitted that he did not know of any immediate threats but that he might have made some along the way. He considered the possibility that they were not as organized as other factions he had faced, but he planned to make protective golems for the house just in case. His mother fretted that he was going on a date with someone dangerous, and his father expressed concern as well. Issei reassured them that he would be fine and reminded them that he had handled dangerous opponents before, assassins, bandits, and corrupted forces he had encountered on various missions. Conversation turned to memories and names of past adversaries as the household settled into their evening preparations, everyone keeping watch over their corner of an ever-shifting world. Issei asked for the usual. May lowered the plates on the table and reassured him that he would be fine, noting that he was well rested here and that his mental state had improved. Issei muttered that he hated that Dmed squid, recalling the extraterrestrial entity that lived deep in the oceans of lore. He shuddered at the memory of its attack. The Dragon of Doom emitted low growls and puffs of smoke at the reminder of the battle. The fight had been two-pronged, striking both mind and body, with psychic assaults and writhing appendages battering them in a way that felt like an anime-styled nightmare. He resented the creature not only for what it had done to the sea elves or the harm it had caused him during the fight, but most of all for what it had forced his human to. His human's voice pulled him back from the memory. Draco responded with a reassuring growl and gently flopped his head against Issei. Issei sensed the dragon's emotions and told him he was fine. He added that a fallen angel could not put him out of commission, and his parents looked at May with concern. Issei grinned and teased his little sister May as he admitted that he had once wondered what a fallen angel used as a necromantic puppet might be like. May scolded him, recalling his brief phase with necromancy after the calamity. May remembered how Issei had delved into the dark art to help purify afflicted souls. He had only mastered the basics, but for a time he had nearly gone too far, almost succeeding in raising an undead dragon with a castle on its back. They had stopped only after he and his dragon collapsed from the powerful food Kiana had made for him, a meal that had grounded even the Dragon of Doom. They had halted the experiment because they could not resist their friend's antics. Issei agreed to be careful but insisted that he be kept away from Kiana. He admitted that Kiana shared the same brain cell most of the time, brilliant when focused, less so otherwise. Mei warned him that Kiana could track him easily. Issei remembered Halloween, hide-and-seek games, and training sessions that had taught him how adept she was at finding him unless he was completely serious. He planned to meet Kiana on Sunday but wanted to deal with a nest of necromancers first. He preferred to summon golems or work with willing souls, thanks to his connection with Aegis and his ability to perceive souls, rather than rely on the souls of the dead the way many necromancers did. Goro sighed and told his son he did not know what he was working on but to be careful, and he added that he would always be proud of him. The family pledged their support. Hearing this, the Dragonlord of Doom suppressed his emotions using his mastery of soul magic, but he could not stop a warm feeling that loosened the necrotic curse within him for a moment. Keeping quiet, the Dragonlord of Storms gently rubbed Kurikara's scales. Unlike Mei and Kiana, Issei often disappeared for days or weeks on end to fight. His adventures, from the depths of the oceans to the courts of Lore's rulers, tended to outshine those of his companions. Issei greeted the child Bella, who looked about 7 and had golden white hair. Bella squealed his name and launched herself at him, crashing into his arms. The Dragonlord of Doom caught her without flinching and returned her hug gently. Issei wrapped his arms to support the dragon-turned-human in his arms and found himself watching his friend, who Bella regarded as a mother figure. Kiana Kaslana, the Dragonlord of the Blazing Void, offered a small, bright smile. Kiana said that Bella had always had a knack for finding him. Issei teased that he heard jealousy as he raised his hand and stroked Kiana's white hair. Kiana replied that she had been worried she would have to wait until he recovered his memories, and she leaned into his hand, content. Issei noted that he had woken up before Mei arrived. Kiana responded that she had seen his handiwork, and she tucked herself to his side opposite Bella, snuggling close for warmth. Issei warned her that they were in Japan and people might think they were a couple, but his arm nonetheless found its way around her shoulder. Kiana made a quiet noise and focused her attention on him. The three of them remembered their adventuring days, snuggling together for warmth in the frozen Northlands and Dragesvard, sharing body heat to avoid freezing. Those moments had become a kind of therapy for both of them after long PRDS of isolation. Kiana mentioned Kuo Academy and the peace treaty Lord Michael had arranged. Issei said that was good. He enjoyed a fight now and then but disliked war, which had made raising his son Draco harder than it should have been. Kiana asked a favor with a smile. As they walked deeper into the park, Kiana clinging to his side, some people watched from nearby. A beautiful blonde with an Italian accent asked a blue-haired girl if that was Sister Kaslana. A girl with orange twin tails scowled at the scene. Sister Kiana Kaslana was well known in the church for being cheerful and dedicated, and seeing her so casual made the girl both happy and a little jealous. She wished she could spend more time with Issei. Tsubaki Shinra whispered that it looked like Issei had been stolen away, and Sona told her to be quiet as she watched the sister of the church with her supposed fiancé. The terms of Sona's engagement had been unusual. She was engaged to anyone who defeated her in chess, but she had never truly been bested by Issei. Issei and Kiana strolled through the park with the young woman clinging to his side. For them, months apart had felt like an eternity. They had a tradition of spending hours close together, especially in cold weather, after being sealed away in places with little social interaction. Kiana had drifted through the void for years, aided by void dragons and Nithara to contain her magic, while Issei had spent his years sealed in enchanted ice, alone some of the time and unconscious at others. Their reunion had been heartwarming but also tinged with sorrow. Kiana asked if he had been the one to take care of the exorcists and the necromancer. She had noticed the residue of a familiar, hijacked form of necromancy. Issei confirmed that he had needed to clean up Kuo. Kiana recognized his shadow-hunting magic and credited Simone for training him, while Issei said he had responsibilities as the second shadow hunter in lore. Bella giggled at the exchange. Issei reminded Kiana that she was powerful enough on her own, and Kiana playfully protested, calling his remark a joke. Issei insisted he had trained hard. Kiana accused him of using hacks, and Issei protested again. Kiana then reached out and lightly covered his mouth to stop his teasing her. Face flushed and her eyes wide. Bella smiled dopey and said that the two of them were being too flirtatious, prompting Kiana to hiss softly and try not to expose Bella to adult behavior. Issei blamed her for starting it, and they exchanged mock glares while a playful tension passed between them. Magic flared briefly around them before they both laughed and let their power fade. Kiana mused that they were still childish despite being in their late 20s or early 30s because of the time distortions they had experienced. Issei smiled fondly and recalled how they had first become friends. While May had been his first acquaintance during Magloween, he had first befriended Kiana when she stopped by Osprey Cove to pick up a contract for her mentor, Zoom. They had literally bumped into each other, followed by a bar brawl and waking up on the beach. Kiana winced as she remembered the number of Moglinberry drinks they had consumed during that bet. Their pride had forced them into a drinking contest, and Issei had miscalculated her hidden strength, which had resulted in him being launched through a wall. Normally that would have either killed him or taken him out of commission, but he had already finished his training as a Dragonlord and dealt with enough dragons to shrug off the damage with ease. Kiana remembered the mess with the barrels and how they had to work for a week to pay it all back. She recalled the time he had been swallowed by a giant whale and had to struggle to escape, and the time a kraken had wrapped its tentacles around her during a chaotic battle. He admitted he had waited a little for payback. He was a teen then and had been a bit petty. He also remembered losing to her afterward, followed by a less rowdy drinking session once they managed to obtain their questionable papers to train as pirates. Many things happened after that. She taught him to use a gun and he taught her to care for his dragon. After the events with the light orb and after she finished her training as a master ranger, he invited her to live with him in his castle, Caer Draconis. The castle was a Dragonlord's domain but far too large for the life he preferred, so he kept a room at the inn in Falconreach. There he spent time with his surrogate family and helped Arya with her hopes of catching Ash's attention. The close-knit daily life had softened him. His old crude habits had mostly faded. He still noticed beauty, but he no longer acted on impulse. He was too busy helping those he cared for, like Arya and her father, Yulger the blacksmith. A gentle embrace drew him out of his reverie. Kiana pulled him close and held him while Bella wrapped her small arms around them. Kiana soothed him, tracing calming patterns on his back, and reminded him that he had friends who would not let him be alone this time: May, Draco, Kurikara, Bella, and others. Issei muttered his frustration at never winning against her, then closed his eyes and found comfort in her steady presence. The familiar solace steadied him through the memories of loss and regret he had carried since the graveside. He stood, towering a little over her, and fixed Kiana's habit on her head. Kiana, the Dragonlord of the Blazing Void, looked at him with trust, respect, and clear affection. She said she wanted to introduce him to her team. Issei half-joked about a harem. Kiana laughed and insisted she was the one with a harem, not him. She made another teasing comment about May that left her slightly flustered. Issei gently covered Bella's ears to spare her. Some things, he thought, never changed, and he held the little dragon's ears with an amused, fond hand. Kiana's playful antics drew a mild scolding from Issei, and Bella promised to be good. When Bella asked if Draco and Kurikara would join them for ice cream after class, Issei confirmed they would. When Bella called him Dad in a burst of gratitude, his heart swelled and he had tears of joy as he hugged the little dragon. Kiana glanced at her watch and announced they would be late. Issei smiled, produced a pocket watch, and suggested they could drop Bella off at his house. His mother would adore her. Kiana asked about seeing May after school, and Issei said he had an anchor set for easy access. He used a bit of light magic to form a gentle illusion around them and carried Bella toward class. Other students noticed his late arrival. Motohama and Matsuda remarked that he was usually punctual. The teacher asked if there was a reason for his tardiness. Issei explained that a cat had gotten in his way and he had taken the long route. May glanced at him with a raised brow, catching the faint scent of someone close and the trace of a bruise healed by light magic on his neck. The teacher then announced a transfer student. Kiana Kaslana entered the classroom in the girl's uniform and greeted everyone cheerfully, introducing herself and asking to be well received. The class reacted with lively excitement, calling her cute and teasing Issei about sharing his supplies. Kei commented that at least she was not another troublemaker. Maruyama noticed Issei's jacket on her and asked about it. Issei nonchalantly explained that Kiana had borrowed it. Maruyama warned him not to take advantage of her, and Issei pointed out that Kiana was the one to be wary of because of her strength. He thought ruefully about how his old impulses had once been driven by youth. Well, not anymore. Issei was currently weakened compared to his 27-year-old body, but his long experience meant it would take only a short time for him to regain his full strength. His adventures had left him a little unhinged, with some loose screws here and there. He rarely relied on necromancy and maintained something similar to a binding vow. The trio now consisted of Mei, Kiana, and Issei, all Dragonlords, though only Issei was a Dragonslayer. He had trained in many disciplines but had mastered only the basics. The areas he had deepened were dragon magic, rift walking, soul weaving, and a careful, controlled form of necromancy. He was also competent with elemental magic but usually preferred light and darkness-based spells over his natural affinity for ice and fire. Mei was attuned to energy and excelled at energy-based magic. Kiana specialized in fire and void magics. Issei leaned toward ice but had developed an attunement to fire as well. Out of the three, Issei remained the most experienced Dragonlord, having bonded with his dragon the longest and being tutored by Lady Celestia. Kiana surpassed him easily in pyromancy and void techniques, and Mei matched them using energy magic. He had an odd dislike for squid-based seafood and anglerfish. Mei watched Kiana in a chicken cow costume and wondered what she was doing. Kiana pretended to be hatching an egg and explained that Issei had told her this would help. When Mei asked where Issei was, Kiana said he was walking nearby. Meanwhile, Issei stood before a two-headed puppy and its larger parent, a guardian hound of the Lorraine underworld, and readied his spear. He focused his attention and prepared for what might come. During training, Issei instructed the blonde-haired nun to focus her light magic on a single point, reminding her that being a healer did not mean she could not fight. Irina whimpered that her body hurt as she lay on the ground, covered in dirt and sweat. Zenobia stayed quiet nearby, breathing heavily as she tried to recover. Kiana grinned and asked Issei how the training was going. Issei assessed the recruits, noting that while they were competent they relied too heavily on their holy swords. He examined the weapons, the holy sword of destruction and a mimic, feeling that, though powerful, they seemed incomplete. A pale, otherworldly night approached, and Kiana addressed the creature by name. Issei had rescued that soul from Doomwood and offered him a choice to come along or pass on. The knight, known as Tommy, had accepted and become one of the few undead companions Issei allowed to retain free will. He had once fought beside King Altion during the rebellion and, after death, had been bound into service under careful terms. Issei had put much paperwork into the arrangement, and Tommy had become a trusted figure, entrusted with the defense of Caer Draconis and the keep's supply route. His neutral presence had helped maintain uneasy peace with the anti-magical organization of the Rose and friendly relations with the Paladin Order. Tommy reassured the anxious nun that becoming undead had not harmed him, explaining that his transition had been conducted under careful supervision. Issei had negotiated strict terms with death, and Tommy could, if he wished, go on to his preferred afterlife. Issei admitted, with characteristic bluntness, that he cared for souls despite his reputation. Irina, still pained by the revelation that her childhood friend had dabbled in necromancy, asked whether necromancers always enslaved souls. Issei explained that the stereotype of soul enslavement did not apply to all practitioners. He described how grudges and unresolved attachments could bind spirits to the world. Necromancers could, like paladins, help such souls pass on, though their methods often involved darkness-based magic. He added that souls with powerful grudges might become corrupted and linger as hostile spirits unless aided. Kiana added that Issei's approach to necromancy was unusual, blending elemental aspects light, darkness, and fire into his practice. Kiana teased Issei affectionately, and Issei responded with mock irritation. The mood lightened as Issei and Tommy shared a fist bump, their camaraderie evident as training continued. Issei explained that studying necromancy had helped him understand and handle necromancers better. Irina asked about the contracts he handed out to his reanimated servants. Issei replied that the contracts were largely the same but included limits. He could not force Tommy to act against his moral code as a knight, and he was required to give Tommy days off. Tommy insisted he did not need days off, but Issei, with a stern look, insisted that since Tommy worked for him he would not allow him to work without benefits. Issei added that his particular practice of necromancy only reanimated bodies and did not involve manipulating souls. Irina pressed her fingers to her temples and said she needed time to think, the information swirling in her head. Kiana agreed that it was a lot to take in. Issei smiled and reassured them that he had already contacted one of the Soul Reapers traveling the world and had a meeting scheduled with Hades. They would permit his method of necromancy as long as he secured an official contract signed by Hades and all parties involved. Irina noted that Hades would likely assign him to hunt undead. Issei admitted that he wanted to go after some targets himself, having gone weeks without a fight. Kiana sighed and remarked that he should not have spent so much time with Artix, remembering how Issei and the Paladin could spend days in friendly undead hunting contests. The Dragonlord of Doom vowed that he would learn, no matter how many forbidden magics it took, remembering the world he loved as his own, his home, the land of lore and its chaotic existence, and resolved to persist no matter how long it took. A waitress presented a special bonkachin with a smile. Issei took a slice and considered having dessert, and the Dragonlord of Doom returned the smile and agreed to enjoy some sweets. Weaver and Soul Ally shared a startled reaction as a young woman approached. The woman asked Issei to go out with her. The two companions sensed a hostile aura around her. Her spirit seemed filled with malice and intent to kill. Issei smiled, noting that he had expected something like this, and mentioned that he would be free that Sunday. Elpis, the elemental spirit of hope, sighed quietly and hoped there would be no misunderstanding this. Later, Issei leaned against his bedroom wall and reflected that Irina and Zenobia both showed potential, each with an affinity for light-based magic, though Irina's felt artificial. Kiana rested her head on his lap and referred to the Holy Sword program. Issei fell quiet, conflicted by the ethics of soul-based energies. As a necromancer and soul weaver, dealing with souls was one of his fortes alongside dragon-based magics. He acknowledged aloud that there were many ways to extract an affinity without causing permanent harm, and that something else was clearly at work, a reminder of an enemy he had faced before, Theano of the Thorns. In the pale moonlight, the young woman at his side relaxed and Issei let his guard down. May smiled at his kindness. She rose and drew the Dragonlord of Doom and the Dragonlord of the Blazing Void into a warm, friendly embrace. They were close friends and adults gathered to enjoy themselves rather than to dampen the mood. The Dragonlord of the Blazing Void teased him playfully and pinned him briefly, and the Dragonlord of Storms joined in with good-natured teasing. Their interaction remained lively and affectionate without crossing into XPLCT territory. Outside the bedroom, Tommy the Loyal Blade, Elpis, and Draco exchanged looks. Elpis demanded his money back, and the undead skeleton knight grumbled before producing the coins. Draco, the small dragon of mischief, glared at Elpis and wondered if his claws might do anything against the elemental spirit of hope. Draco already knew about his human's relationships with Kiana and May and had approved. He had even tried to encourage his human to find more companions and allies. He wanted to ensure his favorite human would not run out of snacks and food and would have future followers, but the smug spirit had spoiled his wager. Goro Hyoudou asked if they had enjoyed the night as he watched May Raiden cooking beside him. Issei teased his mother about her appearance, and father and son exchanged amused grins. It had been a lively evening for everyone. Issei acknowledged that Kiana and May were a little stiff from earlier activity, but he thought it had been worth it. Issei explained that soul weaving was their brand of magic and that his parents wanted to learn it to understand him better. Goro and Mickey listened as he offered to teach forms of magic and asked whether Aegis, Elpis, or Secundus had warned them about what happens when soul weavers die. Goro confirmed that Elpis had explained it. Issei described the art of soul weaving as something born from a desperate sacrifice. Ritualistically offered souls became a medicine and transformed into elemental spirits. In death, soul weavers did not pass into the usual afterlife. They spent what would have been an afterlife on the plane of elemental spirits, unless they were turned into soul-forged items, devoured by other beings in the void, or otherwise consumed. Given his ties to his dragon and the darker practices he had dabbled in, Issei accepted that he might one day become an elemental spirit or something akin to a walking undead, but he also wanted his parents to consider learning a less permanent discipline first. He suggested pyromancy as an accessible alternative, explaining how it involved manipulating fire in precise ways and how their mother would enjoy it because she liked cooking and keeping things tidy. He mentioned that he had learned a great deal from the journal of a mad pyro named Alexander, which had helped him pick up practical techniques. Goro smiled and teased that Issei had finally acquired a harem. Issei flushed and protested at the embarrassment. Aegis, floating nearby, reminded them that Issei was technically 32 if they counted the 5 years he had been sealed away, and Mickey added with a fond smile that he still lived in their house. The family laughter and gentle teasing made everyone feel warm. Kiana giggled as she finished her plate. She mentioned that she could heal herself easily but that May might have to be more careful around their classmates. She thanked Auntie Mickey for the breakfast and said she should get back to the church. Issei offered to take her, and Mickey made a light-hearted comment that set everyone laughing. With calm efficiency, Issei infused his knife and himself with celestial energy and opened a rift between time and space, carrying the Dragonlord of the Blazing Void and the Dragonlord of Doom through to the church in an instant. Kiana ended up balanced on Issei's back as they appeared in the church's altar area. Asia ran forward, relieved to see them safe. Kiana cheerfully announced that she had brought breakfast, carrying the containers Mickey had prepared. Zenobia teased them about how close they looked and made an offhand comment about a faint mark on Issei's neck. Irina reacted with exaggerated jealousy at the attention. Issei tried to wriggle free and called for help, pleading for someone to intervene and asking friends not to stare. Out of the portal, the three-headed Cerberus Spots, and Spotty emerged. The dog trio had been raised largely by Kiana and were fiercely loyal to her, so they immediately moved to respond to her presence. Kiana promised to be careful and adjusted her position so Issei could breathe more easily. Issei continued to protest loudly, begging for assistance and imploring his friends to look away as he tried to extricate himself from the awkward situation. Artix, the paladin, and Issei, the necromancer, shared a tankard by the fire while the battlefield around them was strewn with the broken remnants of a long fight. Artix asked Issei if he ever wondered why they were here. Issei replied that he had not really given it much thought. Artix said that the exercise was worthwhile. Issei admitted that not everyone could be as dedicated to hunting the undead as Artix, and Artix protested that he was a good person. They exchanged wry remarks about how Artix's zeal made him a menace to necromancers and the undead, and then fell into companionable silence. Nearby, a small yellow Pomeranian and a two-headed puppy nosed at scattered scraps, content in the quiet. In a spotless white chamber, a man hummed as instruments and specimen trays were arranged for study. Traces of previous experiments marred the pristine surfaces, and a specimen lay on the table while careful, non-graphic examinations proceeded under the supervision of animated skeleton attendants. A small, furry assistant gripped a staff and reported progress to Issei, who stood watching. The assistant, Least, explained that their research suggested the fallen angels were primarily light elementals with a tint of darkness. Issei examined an orb that contained a strand of dark golden white hair and noted that there were unusual signs of purification within the soul, as if something had been guiding these spirits toward redemption. He observed that angels could fall through succumbing to their desires allowed to experience them within limits, but that excessive indulgence caused dangerous consequences. The darker aspects of Rainer's soul showed the struggle without graphic detail. Least assured Issei that he and his necromancers would uphold the necessary contracts. Issei accepted the promise with a reminder not to overexert themselves, since they still had a company retreat scheduled. Tommy, who had shifted between a more skeletal form and a flesh guise, bowed to Issei and pledged to keep an eye on the others. Though Tommy disapproved of necromancers who enslaved souls for selfish gain, he was lenient towards those who sought to help others. After all, the fallen angel they were studying had once tried to assassinate their lord. Issei expressed concern about their base of operations. Liszt and the skeleton workers defended their cave as being well suited to their needs, arguing that the undead required little comfort. A mummy, who had been working at a computer, and the skeletons bickered in familiar, teasing tones. Issei scolded them for distractions and one of the skeletons grumbled in response. The teasing descended into mild complaints about habits and laziness rather than anything XPLCT, and Liszt sighed as he tried to keep the team focused. A humanoid researcher reported that they had recovered strange artifacts from the stray devils Issei had hunted. The pieces seemed to function like corrupted automata, mutating bodies into devilish forms with a vulnerability to light. Issei confirmed that his hypothesis about the corruption was correct and asked whether a remedy was possible. The researcher apologized that the process was too intertwined with the souls to be handled at his level. Issei instructed him to compile a report for later and mentioned an upcoming meeting with Hades that evening. A muscular young man dressed like a gentleman, John J. Starr, asked if he might accompany Issei. Issei agreed that John could come along. John had been turned into a vampire years earlier under tragic circumstances and had since become one of Issei's most trusted allies and spokespeople. He had once helped Issei during a confrontation in Amityville, where the corrupted Guardian Tower had been defiled, and their bond had been forged in that rescue. John now assisted Issei in both business and field work, uneasy about some necromantic practices but understanding of the difficult choices they faced. Issei teased John about meeting someone special at their retreat, and John protested with embarrassed good humor. Deep in the underworld, Hades, the Grecian god, reviewed the neatly detailed contracts presented from Issei's operations in the devil-controlled territory of Kuro. Necromancers were common, but Issei's careful blending of rules and restraint made his approach unusual, and Hades regarded the documents with measured interest. It might even be the first time someone had requested permission to practice necromancy over all denizens of Hades's domain, and the applicant was willing to undergo a licensing test. A golden-haired woman in a black dress nodded as other gods of death and the underworld filled the meeting room of Hades's castle. Ereshkigal examined the paperwork and found the terms agreeable. Anubis inspected the contracts and argued that someone should watch the necromancer. While his culture was open-minded about the undead, a necromancer bold enough to make such a request warranted oversight. Hades appointed Ereshkigal to keep an eye on the applicant, explaining that the devils in the necromancer's region might try to influence him and that the necromancer should remain neutral. Ereshkigal, a fading Sumerian deity who had found renewed purpose caring for souls, accepted the duty. She opened the dossier they had compiled and widened her eyes at what it contained. A hero and a necromancer at a young age, hiding his status well. Hades recalled his spy reports and concluded that, while the young man would not join the gods, he would cooperate as long as the gods did nothing to endanger the world or his parents. The file listed about 20 confirmed intelligent undead under the young man's command, occupying numerous positions and even branching into civilian enterprises. One called John J. Starr had founded a company and a blood bank, while others worked with morgues, hospitals, and a construction firm. Someone dryly remarked that delegating paperwork had spared them from red tape. The mood shifted when a pleasant voice announced the arrival of a guest. Issei Hyoudou sat on the couch before the Greek ruler of the underworld as a familiar scent and a soft presence returned his vision. Seal Valerai, an Estonian young woman inhabiting a 15-year-old body, stood before them. Seal introduced Issei to Hades and mentioned him as her benefactor. Hades noted that the young man had necromantic ties. Seal protested that Issei was not truly a necromancer, and Issei began preparing tea at her suggestion. He remembered past encounters that left him wary. He and Kiana had once been invited by a powerful man who had nearly destroyed them, and only thanks to Lin's intervention had they escaped a catastrophic defeat. The man before him was formidable in power and experience, and Issei felt the weight of that memory now. Johnny watched his lord as negotiations proceeded smoothly until Seal arrived. Her entrance and cheerful manner made Hades more guarded. It was understandable, since Seal's affinity for soul-based magic had made her one reason their lord treated necromantic subjects more openly. Seal's bond with several Dracolics was strong. One adult Dracolic named Zvezda lingered in the meeting room's shadows at her side. Issei finished preparing the tea and poured it with care, noting that Ciel favored this brew. The aroma reminded Hades of his wife, Persephone, who was away on Olympus for the next 6 months. Ciel, smiling gently, sipped the tea and brightened the room. The tone shifted again when Hades reproached the young man for his nerve. In response, Issei revealed more of himself. A controlled, dark energy radiated from him in an obvious display of power, and his eyes glowed with a crimson light set against pitch-black irises. The room felt the pressure of that presence, and everyone in the chamber tightened their attention. The shadows around him embraced his form as he stood in front of Hades, refusing to back down while he kept a watchful eye on Ciel. Ciel cried out to her grandfather. Hades told Ciel to stay out of it, his voice cold, and Ciel felt tears form from frustration that her grandfather and her friend were at odds. Towering over the Dragonlord of Doom, the ruler of the underworld focused his full might on him, a surge of power that would have overwhelmed any ordinary person. The oppressive force drove Issei to his knees. He coughed and wavered under the pressure. Johnny rushed to his lord and revealed his vampiric traits, ready to defend him. Issei ordered through gritted teeth for Ciel to be protected, voice strained. The pressure from the ruler of the underworld was terrifying, but Issei drew on the dragonic magic and the true nature of his dragon to mend what he could, darkness and energy swarming his form as scales shimmered along his skin. The ruler of the underworld regarded the necromancer with a blank stare, but his thoughts turned to his descendant as he noted how fortunate she was to have such a friend. By Issei's side, the Dragonlord of the undead dragons steeled herself and summoned her scythe. Her attire shifted into a formal gown and she took on an older, more composed bearing as butterflies gathered around her. Spectral wings spread behind the Dragonlord of Doom as he stood tall, a fierce grin on his face while celestial energy reinforced his body, restoring him to his full potential capable of withstanding rifts and vacuums between time and space. Hades asked whether Issei would fight him to claim his place. Responded that he was there to protect his friend, insisting that the ruler had gone too far and that he would not stand by while Ciel was hurt, grandfather or not. For a moment the unstoppable hero of Falconreach revealed a deeper strength as his form shifted and he drew on the souls and primal dragon magic at his command, along with mastery of celestial arts that could rend the fabric of space and time. Ciel pleaded with her grandfather to stop. She did not want a fight. She now appeared older, in her early to mid-20s, composed but distressed. Zvezda, hidden in the shadows behind Ciel, readied herself to act. Hades laughed, a booming sound that echoed through the underworld as more power gathered around him. The force shook the ground, pressing Issei down until his breath came ragged. Zvezda shielded her ally with her body. Hades challenged the idea of sacrifice, and with a motion of his hand a complex seal separated Ciel and Zvezda from him, forming a time-space barrier around them. Issei declared that he would sacrifice himself if necessary to protect those he cared about. Despite the strain, he moved forward and launched a heavy blow at the ruler of the underworld. Hades, thinking of his granddaughter with something like pride, took the hit. The impact sent him through the castle wall and out into the open as reality cracked around the strike. Johnny hurried to his lord and checked for signs of life. Issei had reverted to a younger form, his body showing clear evidence of the extreme strain he had endured. His breathing was shallow and uneven, but Johnny's attention went beyond flesh. He focused on Issei's soul. Trained in the art of soul weaving by the weavers of Ravenloss, Johnny took a strand from his soul ally and wove protections over his lord's essence, sealing it with careful, practiced motions. Hades stopped Johnny and observed the scene. An elemental spirit of light manifested behind Johnny as he stood guard over Issei. The ruler of the underworld displayed the damage to his robes and the visible fractures in his form as evidence of the clash's intensity. With a gesture, the seal containing Ciel and Zvezda dissolved. Hades warned the vampire and then informed Johnny that he accepted the terms of Issei's contracts, allowing Issei freer use of his necromancy. He then addressed Ciel directly, ordering her to take her friend to the infirmary and reminding her to use the healing training she had received. Ciel nodded nervously, torn between concern for Issei and the gravity of her grandfather's command. Hades then instructed Issei to prepare to travel to Kuo to study as a new ambassador between the underworld and the necromancers. He left for his study. Alone in his study, the skeletal aspect of the ruler of the underworld faded into a composed man with silver hair. He reflected on the events with a quiet, almost amused tone, thinking that perhaps this time the world might be made better by a simple soul willing to stand up for others. He allowed himself a soft sound of mirth at the memory of the human who had risked everything because he had made the ruler's granddaughter cry. In that moment Hades indulged in the hope that sometimes what the world needed was a single earnest spirit to carry change forward. Issei blinked. The days had passed quickly with training alongside his fellow Dragonlords and the church, plus some side jobs. Sunday arrived and he prepared to interrogate a fallen angel. He had been enjoying the bit of acting, trying to seem like an idiot, but the performance was only part of the plan. At the end of the day, a lance of light struck his chest, aimed straight at his heart. Yuma Amano sneered that he was a poor human. Issei asked why. Issei's dragon suggested that he consider his acting choices. The strike shredded his shirt and seemed to pierce his body, but it had hardly affected him. He had relied on illusions and performance to sell the attack. Yuma told him to blame God for placing sacred gear within him. Issei wondered about the sacred gear. If something had merged with his soul, he thought he would have noticed by now. Yuma observed that the Gremory and Citri families controlled Kuo and lamented her misfortune, saying she would have liked to do more. For a heartbeat her face had hinted at guilt, but her expression quickly returned to a mixture of glee and disgust as she whispered that it had been fun and mused about Azazel. Issei named Azazel, the scapegoat of God and the current governor-general of the Gregory, which shocked Rainer. He stood, the lance still embedded in his chest, appearing untouched and unharmed. He seized the spear of light and pulled it free, revealing a round hole that would have been fatal to an ordinary human. His body began to heal rapidly. The spear cracked with a harsh sound as his surprisingly strong teeth crushed it. He considered what to do with the fallen angel as his eyes shifted to a vivid shade of blue. Rainer turned to flee, but chains of shadow and blue flame unfurled and bound her, restraining her wings and restricting her movement. A soft blue light mixed with a black aura flowed from him as he closed the distance. Rainer, the youngest but most powerful of her group, had faced life-or-death battles before, yet the thing before her defied her understanding. A shadowed hand steadied her head, and she felt an unfamiliar sensation inside her mind, a probing, searching motion that reached beyond thought into something like the core of her being. Threads of magic threaded through her spirit, assessing and connecting with it. Panic filled her as plans of promotion and offering sacred gear to Lord Azazel dissolved in the face of failure. She murmured an apology to Lord Kokabeel and realized, in a sudden cold certainty, that she had lost. Shadows gathered around her and she collapsed as they enveloped her. Issei Hyoudou held an orb of gold and white tinged with black. A hooded figure bowed to him and addressed him as his lord. Issei instructed the figure to take care of the fallen angel, gather everything she knew, and disseminate that information. He told them to prepare the body so he could experiment on how well a fallen angel could be made into a puppet, noting that their contract with death did not prohibit using humanoids outside of Lorenes for standard practice. The hooded figure, its hood lit by glowing green orbs, nodded in acknowledgement. Issei directed the creature named Lys to handle the procedures and, once complete, to take the others for a team-building rest. They had found suitable locations. Lys also relayed a domestic request from Lady Mickey for groceries and handed Issei a scroll. Issei accepted the scroll and thanked the creature. Later, a familiar voice called out for him in the quiet classroom. Seal Valerai approached and Issei looked up. Kiana would normally drag him off with May, but Kiana was attending to clubroom matters and May was busy with the cooking club. They were all powerful in their own right, but they wanted to experience the school life they had missed. Issei asked what Seal wanted. She invited him to have lunch together. He thought of his research on keeping an undead fallen angel with shadow-based magic and how he had barely eaten, but Seal's cooking was reliable and she was endearing. He agreed and stood up to tousle her hair playfully. Seal leaned into his palm and hugged his arm, mentioning that she had made bread similar to what big sister Serenity had taught her. Issei responded that the bread had better be tasty and walked with her. Nearby, Issekai'ed watched and noted how sweet the moment between the first year and Issei looked. Kate, curious, asked who the girl was. Motohama, ever the gossip, identified her as Seal Valerai, a transfer student from Russia, and added that Issei was close to her but even closer to Kaslana. Ika quietly replied that Kiana and Mei were closer in a different way. Issei had always let his guard drop around certain people and positioned himself to protect them from prying attention. Seal Valerai smiled as she and her friend Issei found themselves hidden from view by a strong illusion while a blanket was spread beneath them. The smell of fresh bread drifted through the air as Issei poured tea into 2 cups. Seal remembered how they first met. The fire war had begun when Issei tried to hunt the great fire dragon to stop it. That conflict brought out his overwhelming mastery of dragon magic and deepened divisions among the Dragonlords, as he developed dragon-slaying techniques focused on elemental dragons. He forced Akraloth, the greatest fire creature in lore, into a stalemate by mastering methods that let him withstand and redirect draconic flames. He also combined ice-based dragon-slaying arts with a legendary frozen claymore that weakened its targets and used techniques that altered his body to consume elemental energies. He defeated the Great Fire Dragon without the aid of his own dragon. Later, the war entered a brutal second phase when a man, blinded by grief, began to enslave fire and plasma dragons. Issei Hyoudou, once the Dragonlord of Hope, became a dire threat to dragons as he pursued the dragons under Kanan's control. His spear, tipped with a Hydra Fang and coated in the anti-dragon metal Dragonbane, was paired with his new dragon-slaying mastery in relentless battles. At that time, Seal had been one of the captives in Kanan's castle. The pyromancer took an unhealthy interest in her necromancy and demanded that she help restore his family after he blamed Issei for failing to save them. Seal refused and instead hid the pyromancer in a communal prison cell. She remembered the day she was rescued. A young man in green armor with red trim had appeared, a small dragon perched on his shoulder and a spear in hand. He removed a dragon-shaped helmet and apologized for being late, explaining he had gotten lost. He joked about the heat in the place they were in. Seal smiled at the memory and told herself the story of the Great Fire War. Issei felt embarrassed remembering how, in his early travels, he had used corny puns and jokes to break the tension. Almost nothing about him had truly changed, only the stakes around him, threats like bombs that could obliterate entire regions, otherworldly invasions, and entities that required intervention from mighty guardians of earth and nature. There were dangers so overwhelming that he had considered drastic paths just to survive them. Issei recalled the painful process of turning himself into a living lich with Seal's help, the harsh sensations it had involved, and how Seal had protected his soul while Kiana worriedly attempted a resurrection. Seal had guided him through soul weaving and animancy training, helping him keep his human flesh. She had been there for his transformation, and he trusted her completely. Seal reassured him that his grandfather would warm up to him, calling the older man a soft-hearted person once one got to know him. Issei, who had finished arduous training to balance life and death and had completed his arch-paladin preparations, acknowledged that he had finished his Grim Reaper training as well. It had taken years in lore but only a week in this place. Seal praised him for his effort. Seal, as the keeper of his soul, knew much of his history, the anger, the doubts, the losses. Issei often confided in her more than in others. He wondered quietly what might have happened if he had never hatched Draco or if he had never reached lore, asking whether someone else might have done better. Seal listened and comforted him, reaching out in a warm, reassuring hug. She encouraged him not to bottle up his feelings, showing the deep affection and trust that bound them. They had bonded their souls in a sign of faith, and while they both understood that Issei's nature as a soul weaver meant he might one day pass on, Seal cherished their time together. Issei teased about minor things, and Seal giggled at his muffled comments. When she checked the time, she reminded him it was almost time to return. He smiled and gently separated himself from her. Minutes later, Issei opened the classroom door and his classmates stared at him. Seal was clinging to his side and he had not noticed at first. A teacher told Seal to go to her classroom. Seal protested that she wanted to stay close a bit longer and leaned against him like a small animal seeking comfort. Issei picked her up briefly in a playful, caring motion and set her down, telling her to behave. She pouted but complied. They moved on with the day, carrying the weight of their shared past and the quiet hope that whatever came next, they would face it together. The first year protested that she wanted it. Issei, the hero of Falcon Reach, took his blazer off his shoulders and gently wrapped it around the girl, leaning slightly to meet her eyes. She smiled gratefully and pressed the fabric closed. The other students erupted into loud, teasing exclamations, joking that someone had kissed Issei and clamoring over the scene. One classmate complained jealously that it should have been them, and the taunt hit a raw nerve. The jeer provoked a surge of Issei's latent power. Dark, rippling energy flared briefly through the room in an exaggerated, anime-like display. Several students wavered and a few fainted from the overwhelming pressure. The short-haired first year responded with calm steadiness, and her composed presence diffused the surge, preventing it from escalating. She gently urged Issei to behave and offered a playful wink to the class before walking away humming. Issei felt momentarily overwhelmed by the sudden closeness, his focus scattering as the unexpected attention washed over him. Issei grinned goofily and thought it was so unfair as he entered the classroom just as Kiana and Mei arrived, their clothes disheveled. The young Dragonlord of Doom smiled as he looked at the new property he had acquired. It was a sizable Japanese estate in the traditional style with extensive underground areas perfect for his necromancers and intelligent undead. Tut, the head of his intelligence division, handed a folder to Issei and reported that they had already managed to get some informants from numerous underground organizations in Kuo. Least added that a study area and workshop for magical activities had been prepared, noting how essential such a space was for mages and spellcasters to expand their knowledge. Issei acknowledged the effort. While he was a lich, he had never cared much for theory, but he did keep an assortment of grimoires and magical books that were steadily being filled with the findings of his undead and their shared knowledge. Among his tomes were the Codex Draconis, a more informal chronicle of Dragonlord magic, plus a copy each of the Eggnonomicon, the Pyronomicon, and the Necronomicon. Seal had gifted him a compilation of her magical knowledge that had become the basis of his Lich Tome. That collection formed the foundation of his Dragonlord Lich Tome, where he recorded necromantic spells ranging from darkness-based necromancy to light element and multi-element formulae. Seal called out that she had a guest, and Issei turned to see a petite blonde with twin tails. A divine aura surrounded her, marking her clearly as a goddess. Tut introduced the guest, and Ereshkigal identified herself as Ereshkigal and expressed pleasure at meeting Issei Hyoudou. She remarked that he was the fabled Lich King, and Issei replied that he was not a king but simply a man who wanted to learn, then offered tea. Ereshkigal accepted. Seal warned Ereshkigal not to get too close, smiling sweetly but revealing a hint of displeasure in her vacant eyes. Issei reached out and hugged Seal gently. She returned the gesture, appreciating the warmth. Ereshkigal stepped back as Seal smiled at her. Of all the companions who had traveled with Issei, Seal was the most dangerous in subtle ways, not the fastest or the strongest, but intimately connected with souls and able to bond with dragons and act as a diplomat between factions. Her soul-based magic complemented Issei's combat expertise and helped secure many of their alliances. Seal pulled away from Issei and asked Ereshkigal in a casual tone if she would like some dessert to go with the tea. Ereshkigal reacted to the blank look on Seal's face with visible surprise. The intensity was more unnerving than many of the things she had recently seen. Seal laughed and offered to use the kitchen. Issei gave permission. He apologized for Seal's odd expression, explaining that she tended to go blank-eyed when nervous. Ereshkigal said she was only shocked to see Seal in that state. Issei explained that Seal's mood varied, usually sweet and polite, but sometimes quick to anger over small things like ruined food. Ereshkigal asked if he spoke from experience, and Issei recalled past memories of accidentally angering Seal and his efforts to calm her. Issei then announced that the estate would be their new base of operations. He addressed the members of his undead legion, whose numbers were fewer than 100. Only 25 were intelligent and fewer still preferred a living form. Johnny reported that connections with other organizations were going strong, while Tut confirmed that the intelligence division had tapped into numerous factions in Kuo and was coordinating with Lady Kiana's exorcist division. Least said their studies of various species had produced extensive reports compiled into a journal. Issei approved of the progress. The 25 intelligent undead had been organized into divisions. Least led research and development, Johnny oversaw medical, Tut handled intelligence, Timothy managed administrative affairs, and the strike squad was led by Luna, an ancient vampire from Doomwood. Seal, flanked by her personal Grim Reaper bodyguards, asked what role she would have. Issei named her ambassador. Seal smiled and stroked the back of Zvezda, the small undead dragon that rested contentedly on her lap. Tut reported that the alliance with the church was going well and that several biblical factions were expected to sign a peace treaty in a few weeks. He also mentioned that subject FA-001 was apparently operating under the orders of Azazel. One of the Grim Reapers reacted with surprise at Azazel's involvement, noting it seemed out of character. The mummy in their midst recalled that subject FA-001 had claimed to possess a sacred gear. Seal observed that the sacred gear had never been awakened, and her remark brought a moment of silence over the gathered Reapers. They all knew the strength of the human in front of them firsthand after he had managed to wound their Lord Hades, and all the more impressive because it had been done without a sacred gear. Issei turned to the princess of the underworld and asked what she thought it might be. The princess admitted she was not sure and said they would not know until he awakened it. Aegis, the elemental spirit of valor, floated by Issei's side and explained that it looked like a gauntlet of sorts, intertwined with his soul, and that his training as a soul weaver might have locked it. Issei asked how that worked, and Aegis replied that it was essentially magic. The princess conceded that it made sense. Issei then asked if they could remove it, and he noticed the frown on Seal's face. Seal warned that ripping a sacred gear out of someone would kill them. Issei asked if that mattered, given that he had already died before. Seal answered that it was both yes and no, because his lichdom was far different from the usual. She explained that while a typical lich would be animated by a single element, her blessing combined with his use of multiple elements had allowed him to retain his life and human form. Aegis added his theory that when soul weavers bonded with a soul ally, their souls became more thread-like, allowing them to transition into elemental spirits after death at the cost of going to their preferred afterlife. In Issei's case, the sacred gear had merged with his soul and would only disappear after an elemental spirit's true death. Issei noted that this amounted to 2 layers of immortality. He then revealed there was another. He was not only a lich but also benefited from eternal youth thanks to Draco. The baby dragon perched on a fluffy bed and let out a proud roar. Issei laughed and qualified that it was more like 2.5 layers. Seal appeared beside the Dragonlord of Dragon's Doom in a flurry of butterflies and teased him, poking his cheek. Issei protested that Sun Wukong was a hero to many children, but he preferred being his own person. Kiba entered the room and asked if Issei Hyoudou was present. The many girls drawn to the blonde knight of Rias Gremory swooned at his arrival. Issei, known as the Dragonlord, felt uneasy about threatening members of the Occult Research Club. He respected them, but his priority remained protecting Mei. After exchanging a look with the Dragonlords of the Blazing Void and Storms, Issei stood up to follow Kiba. Kiba informed him that President Rias wished to speak with him. Issei wondered why, and Kiba explained that Rias had taken an interest in his information about the occult. Issei rose, ignoring the commotion among his classmates, and followed the knight. He carried no weapon, but he trusted his mastery of light-based magic to handle any devils, given their weakness to light. As they walked down the hallway, Kiba commented on sword styles and suggested Issei could enhance his technique by training with different blades. Issei acknowledged the advice but said he had a mission to do. Kiba's face, however, betrayed a deeper anguish. Issei recognized that hatred had taken root in the young devil before him, the same kind that had once consumed a friend named Kanan. Issei warned that hatred was a fire that would destroy everything a person loved if it consumed them. Kiba snapped back in anger and pain, and Issei thought of the past, the death of his dragon-slaying mentor, the massacres that followed, and how it had taken nearly losing everything for that hatred to begin to fade. Issei offered his years of experience with a calm smile, and his eyes flickered with blue for a moment. They arrived at the clubroom, where Issei saw a blonde man manipulating a mix of fire and dark magic. Rias apologized for the interruption and introduced Issei to the man. The man, riser of the Phoenix family, made it clear he did not want any other men near Rias and insisted on the engagement and marriage arranged between their families. Rias firmly rejected the idea. Issei observed the tension as Riser's arrogance flared and he began to form a dangerous fireball. A girl with blonde hair styled in twin drills called out in alarm, and Kiba moved to shield Rias's underclassmen. The fireball rounded the room and came to a stop in Issei's palm, startling everyone. Issei regarded the flames and, after a moment, swallowed the fireball without hesitation. He praised the potency of the flames and told Riser that the power showed potential for a strong pyromancer. Blue flames then coalesced around Issei's left arm, and in a cyan flash he vanished. In an instant, Issei reappeared on the wall above Riser and placed his hand over Riser's chest. With a swift, non-graphic motion, Issei extracted a glowing core of fiery energy from Riser's chest and absorbed it into himself. Riser's body surged with regenerative magic and healed, but a scar remained. The sight of a human having taken that core of energy left the pure-blooded devil shaken and afraid. He could not understand how his lineage could be threatened by a single person. Riser's vision filled with the faces of his little sister and his queen, Ubeluna, and the determination in their eyes. His peerage stepped forward to protect him, each one vowing loyalty and preparing their magic and weapons. Riser felt a warmth and a long-buried resolve awaken within him. The legendary flames of House Phoenix flared as his desire to become stronger overcame some of the fear. Issei, unfazed, noted the rising flames and challenged them. The orange inferno of House Phoenix, fueled by pride and the will to protect, met the blue infernal flames that Issei wielded. In response, Issei reached deep into his soul and invoked the slaying magic he had developed specifically to combat infernal fire. The seal of that slaying magic was directed at the ancient infernal Wargoth, and Issei prepared to confront the blazing threat with that power. He summoned the strongest form of slaying-based magic he had, enough to contend with Wargoth. The blue flames slowed and turned to ice as the temperature around them plunged, causing everyone inside but him to breathe out white mist. The once bright flames of House Phoenix's sun dimmed, and the cold air created a veil that hid the doomed Dragonlord's body, leaving only his blue eyes visible through the mist. Riser demanded an explanation as a magical circle appeared between the Dragonlord of Doom and the Phoenix peerage. A beautiful maid landed before them, flanked by a woman with twin-tailed hair. Issei instantly felt the power gap between himself and the woman. Even in his true form, using all his power, the best he could hope for would be a draw. Seraphal Leviathan, the black-haired twin-tailed woman, immediately accused him of wrongdoing and demanded to know how he dared. Issei answered brusquely, asking what she meant while looking at the smaller girl. Seraphal snapped that he was a thief and introduced herself as one of the 4 rulers among the devils. Issei made an offhand, teasing compliment about her appearance, and Seraphal, flustered, tried to correct him, insisting the matter was serious. Issei joked that he had treated the fight like the hunt of a fire elemental, and Riser flinched at the implication. Seraphal clarified that the dispute was not about the elemental, she was there because Issei had taken someone from her. Issei denied the accusation, admitting his reputation for lewdness but insisting he would never steal someone's partner. Seraphal produced a long stack of photographs and accused him of taking her beloved Sotan, describing the caring gestures she had shown to Sotan, warming the bed, hugging, comforting, and watching over her. Issei asked who Sotan was, confused. Seraphal declared that she would not let Sotan be with someone like him. Issei protested that he was a hero, not a bad boy. The elemental spirit Aegis muttered the word necromancy in passing, and Seraphal greeted the spirit of valor with a brief smile before returning her glare to Issei and asserting that she would not allow Sotan to be taken. Issei reached out and lifted Seraphal's chin, shifting his form back to his true, mature appearance as he steadied her. He suggested calmly that they could explain everything to Sotan and resolve the misunderstanding honestly. Serafal hesitated, embarrassed and uncertain about the apparent age difference between them, but she quickly recovered her composure and asked for understanding in a softer voice. A stunned silence filled the classroom as the members of Riser's Peerage and the Occult Research Club watched the flustered scene unfold. Grafia, who considered Serafal a friend, coughed discreetly while trying to process what she was seeing. After a brief explanation and a bit of magic to tidy the clubroom, Issei apologized and addressed Riser. He admitted that he had been unsettled after his last fight with a fire-based opponent and had acted recklessly, as if on a hunt. Once he calmed the powerful ice-based devil, he returned fully to his current form. Riser stammered nervously and accepted some of the blame, then asked how Issei could be so strong for a human. Issei explained that his strength came from having people he wanted to protect. He recalled a small town that had accepted him, the dragon that had stood by him, and the countless friends he had made. He named Lady Celestia, the high priestess of dragons who had trained him like a sister, and Survive, his mentor, as those who had shaped him. Issei declared that if it was for them, he would risk everything to protect them. He told Riser bluntly that the people around him had potential and should not remain weak, urging him to grow stronger. Memories of past failures pressed on him. A family he had been unable to save during the Great Fire War, an innkeeper who had been controlled by a malicious spirit, and a close friend who had fallen into the void while Issei could only watch helplessly. If given the chance, he would save them all. A woman with white hair and red eyes stepped from the shadows and informed Issei that they had guests. Issei smiled and thanked Luna, excusing himself and apologizing to Rias Gremry. Rias waved off the apology and the red-eyed young woman glared at Serafal before hugging Issei's arm. The two vanished through a magic circle. Time passed and Rias Gremry sighed as she watched a recording. The meeting with Riser had taken an unexpected turn, and seeing her junior dispatch him with ease had unnerved her. His true form was clearly more powerful than the one he normally showed. She noticed a moment she had missed before, her junior reaching for and swallowing a fireball. Rias compared two recordings side by side and realized that eating fire was a sign of Dragon Slayer magic. The revelation hit her hard, and she reacted so suddenly that she slammed the window open and streaked into the night. On the battlefield, cyan streaks darted as a white blur clashed with them. A blade of steel met claws of ice, and a visored hood faced the glare of blue. The combatants hopped away from each other and a magic circle formed under the claw wielder as wings unfolded behind the swordswoman. Timothy, in his skeletal form, observed that they were getting faster while blade and claw rang across the field. May tracked the duo with calm assessment, noting that Issei's mastery of interdimensional hopping rivaled even Kiana's innate connection to the void. Timothy added that Issei's command of the 8-Allen art of riftwalking had made him quite formidable. May saw the Song of the Stars combined with soul blinking in motion and vanished in a purple flash. A katana sang through the air and struck a gauntlet connected to an ice-clawed hand as a shield formed behind the claw wielder to block a greatsword blow from the Dragonlord of the Blazing Void. In an instant, a figure became a cyan streak and left chains of ice blue coiling around the Dragonlord of Storms. Strong arms wrapped around the delicate waist of the Blazing Void's Dragonlord. A forceful throw sent the Blazing Void crashing into the ground before the claw wielder flashed away in purple. Kiba watched from the sidelines, whispering that they did not seem intent on killing each other. A black blur nearly struck the blonde swordsman until the claw wielder twisted like a cat, landing with draconic wings on his back. In a flash, the claw wielder swept in and delivered brutal lariats to both the Dragonlords, sending them reeling against a nearby wall. Rias winced as a wall broke in the training room. May reappeared before the helmed man and the two resumed a fast, flowing dance of blade and claws. Ice and energy intertwined as the tempo rose, the man turning into a cyan streak while May moved with river-like grace. Seal clapped her hands and called for a stop, drawing attention just as a claw of ice nearly struck where May's chin had been and a katana had skimmed aside. Kiana stumbled and fell, landing on top of Issei with her greatsword pressed close to his head. She sat on his torso, breath rising and falling from the exertion of combat. When the young man removed his hood, his face and blue eyes were revealed as the Dragonlord of Dragon's Doom. Issei reappeared in a cyan streak beside Mei and greeted Rias Gremory by name. A beautiful white-haired girl in a gothic dress smiled with respect and adoration for the human. Issei took the towel Luna offered and dried his hair, then asked Rias what had brought her and her group here. Rias explained that they had come to visit and ask some questions. Issei glanced over at his companions and suggested moving the conversation to the living room. Mei moved through the group carrying a dazed Kiana on her back and said she would take Kiana to her room before disappearing in a purple flash. Kiana gave Mei a small, playful nudge before Mei left. Rias reacted with excitement and asked if that movement had been Hiratian, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Rias slammed her hands on the table and asked whether he had been transported to Fairy Tale, leaning in with sparkling eyes. Luna moved between Issei and Rias and told Rias to back off, letting out a small exclamation. Issei brought Luna close and patted her head reassuringly. He smiled and told Rias that he had not been transported to Fairy Tale. Draco grinned and laughed mockingly at Kaneko while monopolizing the bowl of sweets. Issei added that if he had been transported there, he would already have many admirers. He acknowledged the remark and asked how she had reached that conclusion. Luna scoffed but leaned into his hand as Seal took a seat at his side. Rias pointed out that he had eaten Riser's flames and displayed a magical projection of the event. Luna remarked that she was surprised he had not converted the fried chicken into a food source as she studied the blonde's face. Issei shrugged and admitted he had been tempted, then added with a smile that if the two others involved had not appeared they would have had a high-class devil specimen to study, unknowingly making Kiba uneasy. Rias gasped and observed that Luna was a vampire. Luna's voice turned cold as she asked whether there was a problem. Issei's tone was firm but warm as he told Luna to behave, and she complied. Rias apologized, explaining that one of her peerage members was a vampire currently sealed because of his sacred gear. Luna regarded that as interesting, a faint glow in her eyes. A new voice called for Luna to behave and not trouble their guests. The speaker was the third vampire of the Undead Legion, a young woman who resembled Kiana but wore a single braid. She moved with elegant, mature grace while carrying a plate of snacks, her blue eyes full of life despite her vampire nature. She apologized for her sister, introduced herself as Colin Sundenjiger, and said it was nice to meet Lord Issei's guests, smiling in a way that made the Occult Research Club feel quietly evaluated. She then set cups and a teapot on the table and informed Issei that the reports were ready. Issei thanked Colin with a smile before turning back to Rias. Rias remarked that vampires were difficult to find and befriend and hard to keep under one's command. Colin smiled and said her reasons were personal. Rias teased that Issei's dream of being surrounded by admirers had been achieved and offered congratulations on his engagement. Silence fell as Rias realized the remark had been a mistake. The smile vanished and a sense of dread spread across the room, overshadowing the small figure beside Issei. The figure, the Dragonlord of Life and Death and Issei's soul-keeper, slowly set her teacup down. The soft clink seemed to resonate through the room. Seal asked President Rias to explain, her smile sweet as she opened her eyes to a blank, unsettling gaze. Luna, who remained close to Issei, stayed silent while a faint vampiric aura gathered around her. Colin sighed and massaged her temples, wondering about her master's odd behavior. The leader of the Undead Legion shrugged and casually sipped his tea, unfazed by the magical energies flaring around them. Rias paled as she realized the identity of the small figure beside Issei, Seal Valerai, a descendant of an underworld ruler. Rias explained that Issei had become engaged to Sona Citri after beating her in a chess match. Seal turned to Issei, addressing him and easing some of the tension in the room. Issei explained that Sona had challenged him to a chess match and that he had tricked her into admitting defeat, not realizing that it would lead to an engagement. Seal made her displeasure clear. Issei apologized and gently adjusted Luna before turning his attention to Seal and offering comfort. Seal, still pouting, leaned into him. He then called for Colin. Colin bowed and acknowledged Issei, then guided her sister Teresa toward the door, knowing their lord's attention should remain with Seal for the moment. Teresa protested about unfinished homework as Colin escorted her out. Issei apologized for the interruption and comforted Seal as she settled close and rested her head against his shoulder. Rias observed that the two were very close. Issei acknowledged they had a special relationship and explained that he had not been transported to Fairy Tale and felt fortunate to have been transported to the world where he had ended up. He looked down at Seal's pouting face. They had traveled and helped one another through countless battles, and despite the pain, he would never give up that bond. He revealed that he had indeed been transported to another world, which made Seal pout in mild frustration. Rias brightened with excitement and peppered him with questions about what kind of world he had been transported to, whether he had been a hero or a villain, and whether he had many admirers. Issei answered as best he could while Rias's questions flowed. After the stressful conversation, Issei sighed and gazed out the window of his residence in his new estate. Seal peered out from under a blanket and began to speak. Issei gently reminded her that he had promised to respect her wishes and assured her that he would only welcome people she approved and would always put her first. He smiled and placed a warm hand on her cheek. Seal leaned into the gesture. He knew he might lose others but not her. Their souls had been bound by a solemn ritual she had performed to save him, creating a deep and permanent connection between them. The bond caused complications, but Issei accepted them. Seal apologized, struggling with her words. Issei reassured her with a smile that she was not a burden and that he would always be with her, then drew her closer in a gentle, affectionate embrace. For a moment, Seal's expression shifted, a flash of restrained intensity surfacing before she relaxed again. Viliona, the split personality inside Seal, re-emerged, and in an instant the Dragonlord of Doom found himself pinned and serving as a makeshift seat for the inner personality of his dearest Seal. Viliona pressed a dainty foot to his cheek and gave a cruel smile as she accused him of flirting with other girls and asked if he had no shame. Issei snapped back, telling her to stop teasing him, while inwardly noting how cute she looked when she flushed. Unlike Seal, Viliona was direct and outspoken. She was more open with her thoughts, and what endeared her to Issei was a surprising innocence. Compared to the gentle Seal, Viliona felt more innocent and oddly adorable to the Dragonlord of Life. Viliona stammered and blushed, looking around before curling over him and insisting that she was only behaving that way because Seal liked it. Issei denied being a pervert with a grin as she tightened her hold on his shirt. Viliona muttered insults under her breath, then fell silent, and the gentler Seal returned. Two robed figures panicked about how they would explain the situation to Lord Hades. One accused Lady Seal of being clingy and insisted she was the problem. The other feared punishment and urged them to think of a solution. A hooded figure watching from a nearby building asked what they were doing, and the two Reapers explained that they were watching over their lady. Tut stepped forward from the shadows, wrapped in bandages and dressed in a hoodie and jogging pants. He observed that Lady Seal had once again been unusually sweet to Master Issei, and he admitted he would not have expected her to make the first move. He remembered she had always been attentive toward Issei. One of the robed figures recoiled and labeled him a zombie, prompting a flurry of embarrassment and bickering. Tut corrected them, identifying himself as a mummy, and the robed figures traded exaggerated, overblown stories about other Grim Reapers' mishaps with mummies. Tut sighed inwardly at the ridiculousness of it all after 200 years of undeath. Tut then addressed the two Grim Reapers directly, identifying them as the Reapers assigned to protect Lady Seal and introducing himself as Tut, one of the intelligent undead in Master Issei's legion. He asked them to stop following Seal so closely. At that moment the two Reapers felt the weight of many gazes. From the shadows a two-headed dog the size of a small couch regarded them, and undead creatures from wolves to dragons turned to look. Blue eyes glowed in the dark as the Legion observed, waiting. Tut explained that protecting those their lord loved was their pride and duty. He introduced himself properly as the leader of Lord Issei's secret service and the personal bodyguard of Lady Seal. The robed figures protested, each claiming to be Seal's true protector and exchanging heated insults. Scythes were grasped and a bow of blessed light gathered in Tut's hand in a tense standoff. The two-headed dog stepped between them and spoke for the Legion, reminding the Reapers that their role was to protect Lord Issei and Lady Seal. Tut dispersed his bow of light and calmed the situation, offering an apology for the outburst. The other Reapers accepted and apologized as well, and the confrontation dissolved into uneasy peace. Issei entered the classroom he had been assigned to, blinking as he adjusted to the light. He had stayed up all night finishing paperwork and research and development notes for the Legion. He wore a blue shirt instead of his usual red, and his newly made Death Knight relic rings adorned his right hand. Classmates reacted with a mix of teasing and surprise. One called him a traitor, another asked if he had enjoyed the previous night. Kiana teased him as she passed, and Mei smiled and playfully chided him. Kiryu pointed toward his neck, and Kiana handed him a pocket mirror. He noticed a small, unfamiliar mark there and felt a moment of embarrassment. He tossed the mirror back and took his seat, trying to ignore the whispers. Issei considered how he should build connections with the other factions. While he already had ties to the Shinto, heaven, and possibly the underworld, there were still many factions he needed to reach. He sighed and made a mental note of these priorities. His body still needed time to recover. Shadow hunting was an ancient art created and practiced by the de Bellamants. In the current age, only 2 people still practiced it: Issei Hyoudou, the hero of Falcon Reach, and Simone de Bellamont, scion of House de Bellamont. As leader of the Undead Legion, Issei bore the responsibility of containing his own subjects if any went rogue. To that end, he had taught the most effective techniques for dealing with creatures of darkness to his loyal maid and assistant. A blur of white and blue moved through the shadows of the underworld as a stray devil whimpered while its limbs were immobilized by precise shadow-binding strikes. The stray devil, whose form mixed human and chimera traits, thought that his sister was far too cruel when he heard a new voice. He turned to see a beautiful young woman with white hair and red eyes in a gothic dress, Teresa, who sometimes went by Luna. Colin Sundengiger emerged from the shadows and told Teresa to focus, reassuring her that Master Issei would be fine. Colin belonged to a clan on Doomwood closely tied to the de Bellamants. Instead of her sister's chainsaw blade, she wielded a pair of pistols. Skilled with many weapons, she favored using her body in combat and carried the lineage of a pure-blood vampire descended from Doomwood's queen. Teresa, impatient for more excitement, swung her chainsaw sword. The blade caught the devil's shadow with a whirl of teeth and sparks. The creature's form frayed and dispersed like a dissolving silhouette rather than a physical body. Teresa reacted with disgust at the ruined construct, and Colin scolded her for being careless and unsanitary. Teresa asked whether they could get sweets later. Colin promised they could after finishing the contract. Colin had had enough of her sister's antics. She fired a measured blast of black magical energy from her pistol that neutralized the remaining corruption surrounding the devil. Teresa complained that it was ruined, and Colin told her to clean up while she took the pawn from the ruined snarl of darkness and completed the contract. Teresa beamed and agreed, grateful to her sister. Far away, Tut the mummy smiled at his computer. It had taken persistent study, but his intelligence and dedication had finally allowed him to master the internet. When an unexpected overlay appeared on his screen, a stylized bunny image, Tut responded with a typed message to Lady Bronya, agreeing to take the original role and asking her to keep it quiet. A reply from the hidden operative acknowledged the arrangement. In a distant safe house, a young woman with gray hair sat by a machine-lined desk. The corridors leading to the computer room were littered with incapacitated enemies rather than living threats. A mechanical dog stood at attention beside her. When a twitching figure lay nearby, she raised her pistol without hesitation and ended the threat with a single, clean shot. She then walked away coolly through the silent hall. The Undead Legion, an organization of undead and humans under the command of the living undead Dragonlord, was stationed in Kuo, Japan, and had quickly established a reputation for counter-terror operations. 25 intelligent undead were divided into several units to carry out the Legion's missions. Issei, the leader of the Undead Legion, sat tired and sweaty after a long night of studying. He offered a grateful prayer to the goddess for her blessings, then felt a sudden impact. A bullet struck his head, and he collapsed as his body began to react and heal. Timothy, his loyal butler, immediately drew a long sword and grabbed his master to keep him from falling. Issei noticed a glint in the woods as a bullet sailed past. Blessed silver rounds were the kind that could incapacitate him if they accumulated enough damage. A cyan flash marked where one of the rounds hit the ground. Issei noted that someone who knew his skills was hunting him. He brought forth his Soul Weaver trench coat and a visor formed over his eyes. With practiced speed, Issei shifted between the void and the earth to close the distance, arriving at the sniper's nest only to find a lone casing. His instincts alerted him before the nest detonated. A sudden explosion would have reached him if he had not soul-blinked to a nearby branch. He took a moment to steady himself and then opened a rift back to his headquarters. A hidden figure in the woods watched Issei disappear into the rift. Issei warned Timothy, Luna, and Seal that they were being hunted and that the rounds used had been blessed silver. Colin noted with concern that someone skilled enough to track them here had managed to sneak past their wards and find possible sniping positions. When Issei paused, Luna asked if he was all right, and Issei dismissed it and ordered Shadow Strike. The sisters exchanged determined looks. Issei explained that the Shadow Hunting Squad, a code used to hunt down spies or assassins, was known only to Timothy, Luna, Colin, and the intelligent undead of the Strike Division. He trusted his undead minions but acknowledged they had their own motives. Colin acknowledged the orders with a bow, and Luna confirmed them with a grin. Issei then asked Seal to prepare equipment for what he called bunny hunting. Seal, still half asleep from being woken by gunfire, asked what he meant, cranky enough to be dangerous. Issei explained that the assassin had known how to disable his wards and had used one of their sniping positions, which had been trapped with anti-undead elements. He winced at the phantom pain of a bullet passing through his head, aware that in his younger form he could not safely release most of his power. Seal sighed, saying she had an idea who the attacker might be, then stood and adjusted her pajamas. Issei noticed the change in her aura and paled, knowing he could contain her if necessary but that it would be difficult in his current state. He could access his adult form only for a limited time each day. He thought resentfully that the others were so much more powerful than he was. He reminded himself that, despite his limited current strength, he could cut through dimensions and that his training in the Song of the Stars had pushed him to extremes. Kiana's pyromancy was instinctively more powerful, May was a trained sword master and skilled in dragon care, and Seal, as a demigod tied to life and death, far outclassed him in necromancy. Issei also acknowledged his own specialty, weaving with souls. The art of battle weaving, a combat adaptation of the artisan techniques of soul weaving, had marked him as a pariah to some, since anyone from the Soul Weaving Academy would disapprove of using spirit looms in battle. His friend and mentor Tomix had taught him only the basics of soul weaving, but battle weaving was the first form he had mastered outside of dragon magic. The Dragonlord of Doom glanced at his reflection in a nearby mirror and noted his black sclerae and blue, pupilless eyes, a reminder of his true status as a living undead. His exposure to elemental orbs had removed many typical undead weaknesses and left him in a strange state of being alive. Gently, he pulled the Dragonlord of life and death into an embrace to calm her, relieved when soft breaths returned to her in his arms. A rampaging seal disturbed from sleep could not be allowed. The head of the Legion's intelligence division, a mummy, bowed at the door. Issei ordered the mummy to gather information on every faction they had contact with, positive or negative, and explained that Seal had an idea who was responsible but needed to rest. The mummy bowed and departed, and Issei carried Seal as he retreated to a safe house, slipping through dimensions with a quick cut made by his dagger. May looked at Issei in alarm as she finished cooking, a ladle in her hand and a stern glare fixed on him. Issei revealed that a marksman had shot him in the head with anti-undead bullets and somehow slipped past their wards, then took another sip of his tea while Kiana watched him with a raised brow. Irina rushed forward, worried about how he could still be alive. Seal, Kiana, and May all said that it was magic. Issei confirmed that to Irina. Zenobia questioned whether their security had been lacking, glancing at the dragons lying on the ground inside the Hyoudou household. Mickey prepared the meals and asked if he would be all right after an apparent assassination attempt. Issei smiled and reassured her that he would be fine. It felt more like a greeting than a true attempt, and only a few people should know how to bypass his wards. Kiana lowered her chopsticks and sighed, saying that someone had found them. Seal, recovering from fatigue, named the only person skilled enough to pass under their radars, though she wondered why that person had tried to kill him. Goru teased that it might be an ex-lover, prompting Irina to pout and Goru to be playfully scolded. Issei dismissed the idea, noting that most of his old acquaintances from lore were already present. He wondered aloud whether it could be one of the mana huntresses. Small wing beats announced Draco landing on Issei's head. The little dragon opened his mouth and chirped. Issei scolded Draco for taking food from strangers. Then a bored voice echoed through the room and caused Asia and Zenobia to reach for their swords while Issei felt the cold touch of a rifle barrel against the back of his head. The voice named Mei, Seal, and Kiana, teasing Kiana as the fool. Kiana bristled and lowered her pistol while Bella giggled, seated comfortably on Kiana's lap. Seal pushed the barrel away from Issei in a pout. A teenager, about Seal's age, smiled, poked Seal's forehead, slung the rifle over her shoulder, and bowed politely to Mickey and Goru. She introduced herself as Bronya Zacic and said she had once traveled with Issei in lore. Luna, watching TV on the couch, hugged the petite Russian woman and called her captain. Bronya admitted that she had been the one who shot him and told Issei he had been sloppy. She had expected him to dodge her attempts the way he always had, even before he mastered the skills of a Dragonlord. Issei protested to himself at letting his guard drop. Bronya teased that Seal, not she, would be his wife, which made Seal blush at the reminder of their complicated relationship. Issei's parents, Irina, Zenobia, and Asia froze at the news, their reactions ranging from ecstatic to quietly jealous. Issei clarified that his bond with Seal was a soul-bonded marriage and not a formal marriage. Seal pouted at Bronya but then grew shy and flustered, her eyes and hair shifting colors as her demeanor changed between protectiveness and sweetness. At that moment, Tut and the rest of the intelligence division entered in human form, bowed, and set down boxes of gifts. Kiana protested that it looked like bribery. Bronya smiled smugly, then turned to Goru and Mickey, explaining that she had heard much about them from Issei and, unsure of their preferences, had brought gifts as an apology for the commotion she had caused. She offered the presents with a formal bow.